son David left the psychiatric unit, she said she warned staff he was too unwell to come home. 10 days later, he stabbed a man to death who was out walking his dog because of the voices in his head. Sharon is demanding a public apology from Howell Dider, health board for both her son and the family of the man he killed, Louis Stone, saying it could have and should have been prevented. Howell Dider said confidential information prevented it publishing its report. Sharon raised her son David Fleet in the seaside town of Borth, Ceredigion. David loved being on the beach, she said. Growing up in Borth was really good for him. He was very quiet, would easily get lost in the crowd. Growing up, tiny little obsessions made her suspect he was autistic. He was diagnosed at 15, but as he turned 17, other things began to worry Sharon. He seemed to think that we'd put something on his head to erase his memory. It was like he was seeing things that weren't there, said Sharon. He started smoking cannabis to sort of manage those symptoms, said Sharon, adding he struggled to sleep. One day she walked into his bedroom to find quite a lot of blood everywhere. He'd severely self-harmed. She rushed the son to A&E and he was treated with antipsychotic medication. When he was well enough, he moved away from home to complete a college course, but he later relapsed and had to return home. It was clear that he was in psychosis. He started asking bizarre questions about someone watching us. Fleet also began taking knives to bed with him and trying to light small fires in his bedroom. Eventually he said to me that he thought he might have to kill someone because people are watching us. There was hidden cameras everywhere and nowhere is safe. That was when I said he had to come with me to hospital. We had to prise the knife off him to get him into the car and get him into hospital. In October 2018, Fleet was detained under the Mental Health Act, but when he was allowed home for visits, Sharon said she warned hospital staff he was still buying cannabis and looking for knives. After 4 months as an inpatient, staff decided he should be treated at home. I just cried because I just don't know how I'm going to cope. He's over 6 foot tall. I can't stop him from going out. Early on 28th of February 2019, 10 days after being sent home, Fleet left the house with a knife. I'm trying to phone him, trying to message him. I looked out of the back window and I could see the air ambulance. I just remember having this really sinking feeling, like I knew. Fleet had never met his victim before that day. Mr. Stone from Staffordshire was walking his dog Jock along the bank of the River Leary whilst visiting his nearby holiday home, which he and his wife had plans to retire to. Fleet later told psychiatrists if he had not stabbed Mr. Stone, the voices in his head were going to kill him. The family of Mr. Stone, who died in hospital 3 months after the attack, said their lives changed in the most horrific, heartbreaking way. They said the old-fashioned gentleman who was adored by his wife, children and grandchildren would have been defenceless. BBC Wales Investigates has seen a copy of an internal health board report into David's care prior to the attack. It reveals that 3 weeks before the stabbing, a doctor had warned he was not ready to leave hospital because of his worsening mental state and the risks he posed with knives. Just days later, he was sent home without anyone updating his risk assessment, and staff were meant to contact him the day before the attack, but did not because of their workload. He also did not receive a dose of his antipsychotic medication. David pleaded guilty to Mr. Stone's manslaughter due to diminished responsibility, and was detained indefinitely at a secure psychiatric unit on the 16th of September 2019. What is psychosis? Psychosis refers to a group of mental health issues including schizophrenia. Perception, thoughts, mood and behaviour are significantly altered. About 1% of the population can be affected, but psychosis still has stigma and limited public understanding. Family and friends are important in the assessment, engagement and successful delivery of long-term effective treatments. Mr. Stone's family said there was no excuse or forgiveness for David and nothing could be said or done to help them understand or move on from what's happened. They agreed there were huge failings in the mental health sector to have such a monster released and walking the streets, able to cause such harm, and want David Fleet to remain locked up. How common are mental health homicides? Studies by the University of Manchester suggest between 2010 and 2020 there were 5,876 homicide offenders in the UK, of which 610 or 11% were under the care of mental health services. While there was a fall in the overall homicide rate in England and Wales since 2008, the percentage of homicides carried out by people with schizophrenia actually increased. Researchers said drug and alcohol misuse were known to elevate risk. The Welsh Government has the power to commission independent mental health homicide reviews and share lessons as widely as possible. But BBC Wales Investigates has discovered that since 2016, it has stopped asking for them. This means lessons from this and 3 other killings involved mentally ill people in Wales in that time had not been shared. Lord Alex Carlile, a former MP and barrister with decades of experience in homicide cases, is critical of the failure to share information in David's case. It is absolutely dreadful. It is essential that in cases where there is a major safeguarding issue, information should be shared by all the relevant public and private sector organisations. He also said the Welsh Government should have commissioned independent reviews into other medical and mental health homicides in this time, calling it a 7-year scandal. The Welsh Government's decision means that 4 years on from the killing, Mr Stone's family have not been able to see information about the missed opportunities to monitor Fleet. Hywel Dda Health Board and said it shared its internal report into Fleet's care with some of its own staff and the Welsh Government, but could not publish it because it contained confidential medical information. In a private letter, Sharon was told it had subsequently made changes to its services, but she believes that had details and lessons been shared with other health boards, it could potentially have prevented other killings. The Welsh Government said it was satisfied it had not needed to commission independent mental health homicide reviews since 2016 because health boards had been thorough when investigating their own cases. However, it did admit the wider review system needed to change to ensure better communication and coordination, so it was introducing the Single Unified Safeguarding Review. A spokesman added, "This new approach eliminates the need for families to take part in multiple, often onerous and traumatizing reviews and will be more quickly identify learning, build a greater understanding of what happened during an incident and why, and provide a clear action plan to improve services." Sharon believes her son was let down by mental health services, leaving 2 families devastated as a result. "The feelings of guilt and remorse that David is feeling are incomprehensible," she added. She now wants the health board to say sorry to her son and Mr Stone's family. "It's really important for just not only us, but for Mr Stone's family to have a public apology because of his illness and the lack of care that he received. It only feels justified that he also receives an apology because the health board failed him, which then in turn failed his victim's family." Social media scammers are charging pupils hundreds of pounds for what they claim are leaked GCSE and A-level exam papers, but are likely to be fakes. A GCSE pupil who was quoted £500 for a paper by someone on Instagram said the idea papers might be for sale was the most talked about hype of exam season. "It is extremely rare for genuine papers to be leaked," exam boards said, but they added the scams were becoming more common, with fraudsters charging between £7.50 and £4,000 per paper. Instagram, TikTok and Snapchat said fraudulent activity was against their rules and anyone who spotted such accounts should report them. Exam regulator Ofqual warned any students caught cheating could be banned from taking their exams. Jade, not her real name, spoke to BBC News on condition of anonymity. The 15-year-old first saw accounts claiming to sell GCSE exam papers on TikTok. In a conversation with one of the accounts, she was then told to contact the seller on Instagram. "I was taken aback because it was ridiculous prices," Jade said. Anywhere north of £500 for a paper was the typical offer from multiple accounts for one exam paper. Jade did not buy the exam paper, but said she knows students who have paid up to £900. Another student told BBC News they had paid a social media account £60 last year for a GCSE maths exam, but they were left feeling hurt and annoyed when the account blocked them and failed to send anything. Jade said some students were panicking this year because there is less support for pupils sitting exams in England in 2023 than there has been for other year groups since the pandemic. "The people who buy from these accounts are your most desperate students. These accounts are actually very clever and sneaky in what they do, preying on this vulnerability. You wouldn't meet a single student across this whole year that has not heard of these accounts. They are everywhere." BBC News posed as a GCSE student and contacted 2 separate Instagram accounts claiming to sell exam papers. One quoted a price of £120 for an AQA geography paper and £150 for an English language paper. Another account also quoted £150 for a single exam paper. Both accounts asked to be paid through the payment app Cash App, but our £150 transaction was blocked by Cash App on several occasions, so the scammer asked to be paid with a gift card for a high street retailer. After paying the agreed fee, our messages were ignored and no paper was sent to us. The scammer's social media account was then deleted before BBC News had the chance to report it to Instagram. A spokesperson for Meta, the company that owns Instagram, said the sale of future exam papers or answer sheets was not allowed, and any such content would be removed from the platform. AQA case analyst Bill Hewison said many used doctored images of previous exams, changing the date and text on the front cover to try to dupe students. A few weeks ago, we saw an account claiming to sell one of our exams for £7.50. Right at the other end of the scale, you've got thousands of pounds being quoted, £2,000, £3,000, £4,000. BBC News was granted exclusively access by exam board AQA to see how its malpractice teams try to shut down the fraudulent accounts. They do not know who is behind the accounts, but they have scoured social media for anyone claiming to sell papers to students before and during exam season. Exam boards have no power to shut the accounts down, so instead they report them to social media platforms, often citing copyright as a way to escalate the complaint. A spokesperson for TikTok said any accounts promoting fraud or scams are removed, while Snapchat said users should report suspicious activity so that action can be taken. In 2019, exam board Edexcel apologised after part of an A-level maths paper was shared on social media the day before the exam. But legitimate leaks are rare and fraudulent accounts on social media are a growing problem. If we do a search on Tuesday, we will see 5 accounts. If we do the same search on Wednesday, we will see 10 accounts, Mr. Hewison said. If you get one, they'll just create another account. Joint Counsel for Qualifications Chief Executive Margaret Farrer said it was like digital whack-a-mole. As soon as they try to close down one of these fake accounts, another one opens up, she added. Ofqual Chief Regulator Joe Saxton told students not to rely on fraudsters on the internet ahead of their exams. You risk not only losing money, but the consequences for you are really serious. A man has been charged after a protester ran onto the racecourse during the Epsom Derby on Saturday. The horse racing event was targeted by animal rights protesters who attempted to breach a large security operation in order to disrupt the day's main race. Ben Newman, aged 32, from Hackney, East London, has been charged with causing a public nuisance, Surrey Police said. He is due to appear at Guildford Magistrates Court on Monday. A man was seen being bundled to the floor by police and security guards during the opening seconds of the prestigious race. He was quickly removed from the course while being jeered by spectators. The race was unaffected. The protest went ahead despite the Jockey Club, which runs the event, being granted a court injunction prohibiting the group Animal Rising from disrupting it. The group had publicly threatened to stop the main race going ahead, saying it wanted to raise awareness about animal rights. Mr. Newman was one of 31 people arrested in connection with the planned protests, including 12 on the racecourse grounds and 19 during a preemptive operation in the hours before it began. Surrey Police said 2 women were arrested after being quickly detained moments before they were able to get onto the track. Mr. Newman is the only protester to face a charge so far. The remaining 30 people have been released on bail pending further inquiries, the police have said. Police are keeping an open mind about the circumstances that led to the deaths of a girl and boy pulled from the sea off Bournemouth. Joe Abbess, aged 17, from Southampton, and 12-year-old Suna Khan from Buckinghamshire both died in hospital after the incident on Wednesday. Dorset Police said it was considering causes including the impact of weather conditions and the state of the water. The force has dismissed speculation the pair had jumped from the pier. The incident involved 10 swimmers on a day when the beach was packed during half-term. The Dorset Belle sightseeing boat was impounded by Dorset Police in the immediate aftermath, but the force said this was just one of several lines of inquiry. Detective Chief Superintendent Neil Corrigan said, "We are working with experts from partner agencies to understand all of the factors, and this will take time to establish. We continue to support the families of Joe and Suna, and they are being kept updated by specially trained family liaison officers about our investigation." The force said none of the swimmers was involved in any collision or contact with any vessel in the water. It has appealed for witnesses and urged people to send it any photographic footage. A man in his 40s who was on the water at the time was arrested on suspicion of manslaughter. He has since been released while inquiries continue. The force said an inquest into both of the deaths is anticipated to be opened later, subject to confirmation by the coroner. "20 years ago, no one had heard of the term ultra-processed foods, or UPF, but about half the things we now eat in the UK are made that way. From sliced down brown bread to ready meals and ice cream, it is a group of foods made with varying but often substantial levels of industrial processing. Ingredients used such as preservatives, artificial sweeteners and emulsifiers do not typically feature in home cooking. Ultra-processed foods are among the most profitable foods companies can make," says Professor Marion Nestle, a food politics expert and professor of nutrition at New York University. "As our consumption of ultra-processed foods goes up, the UK is one of the biggest consumers per head in Europe. So have rates of diabetes and cancer. Some academics think the link is not coincidental." Professor Tim Spector is a professor of epidemiology at King's College London who studies trends in disease. He told the BBC Panorama programme, "In the last decade, the evidence has been slowly growing that ultra-processed food is harmful for us in ways we hadn't thought. We're talking about a whole variety of cancers, heart disease, strokes and dementia." Ultra-processed convenience foods contain chemicals that UK regulators say are safe, but Panorama investigates emerging scientific evidence of a link between some of these chemicals and cancer, diabetes and strokes. In January, one of the most comprehensive studies on ultra-processed food by Imperial College's School of Public Health was published in the Lancet Medical Journal. The study of 200,000 UK adults found that higher consumption of ultra-processed foods may be linked to an increased risk of developing cancer overall, and specifically ovarian and brain cancers. And as of last month, the World Health Organization, WHO, is now cautioning against the long-term use of artificial sweeteners, citing potential health risks. It follows dozens of studies linking increasing consumption of UPF to increased risk of developing serious illnesses, but proving that specific ingredients cause human harm can be challenging. There are a range of other factors in our lifestyles that can cause these diseases, for example lack of exercise, smoking or sugary diets. Common ultra-processed foods include mass-produced bread and sweetened breakfast cereals, instant soups, pre-packaged and microwave ready meals, fruit-flavoured yogurts, reconstituted meats such as ham and sausages, ice cream, crisps and biscuits, soft drinks and some alcoholic drinks like whiskey, gin and rum. The first investigation into mortality and consumption of ultra-processed foods started in France at the University Sorbonne Paris Nord as part of the ongoing study into the eating habits of 174,000 people. "We have 24-hour dietary records during which they tell us all the foods, the beverages and so on that they are eating," explains Dr. Mathilde Trouvier, who heads up the study. The ongoing research has already published results showing that UPF may drive an increased burden of cancer. More recently, they have been looking into the impact of one specific ingredient, emulsifiers, which act as a glue in ultra-processed foods to hold everything together. Emulsifiers are the holy grail for the food industry. They improve the appearance and texture of food and help to extend the shelf life far beyond that of less processed food. They're everywhere, in mayonnaise, chocolate, peanut butter, meat products. If you eat, you're likely to be consuming emulsifiers as part of your diet. BBC's Panorama was given exclusive access to Dr. Touvier's early results. They are yet to be peer-reviewed, a crucial verification step for scientific studies, but she said they are still concerning. "We observed significant associations between emulsifier intake and increased risk of cancer overall, and breast cancer notably, but also with cardiovascular disease. This means that a pattern has been observed between consuming ultra-processed foods and disease risk, but further research is needed." Despite the growing body of evidence, the UK's Food Standards Agency, FSA, which regulates the food industry in England, Wales and Northern Ireland, has yet to issue any regulation restricting emulsifiers. When Panorama asked the FSA about the growing body of evidence that these additives could cause harm, it said, "We have not been presented with any evidence, by this programme or otherwise, of any specific emulsifiers which are believed to pose a risk to health." But the FSA said it planned to hold a public consultation. Could the food industry itself be playing a role in pushing back on regulation? The BBC Panorama team spent the last 8 months investigating. Food companies are not public health agencies. Their job is to sell products, food politics expert Professor Nestle said to the BBC. She said the food industry has been known to fund research, sponsor experts and disparage existing studies to prevent regulation. The International Life Sciences Institute, ILSI, is a body that receives funding from some of the world's largest food companies. It says its mission is to provide science that improves human health, but it has previously published studies globally undermining regulation and public guidance on healthy diets. In 2012, the European Food Safety Agency was so worried about potential conflicts of interest, it insisted anyone associated with ILSI either had to resign from the institute or leave the agency. Professor Alan Bubis, Emeritus Professor at Imperial College London, is an unpaid director of ILSI Europe and a former vice president of its board of directors, but he also heads up a group of UK scientists known as the Committee on Toxicity, which provides advice on the risk of chemicals in food to the FSA. More than half the members of the committee have recent links to the food or chemicals industries, and over the past 10 years the committee hasn't supported a single restriction on the use of any chemical additive in our food. Professor Bubis told Panorama his advice wasn't slanted to favour industry, and he had always been committed to conducting and identifying the very best scientific research, whoever is funding it. The Food Standards Agency said it had a clear code of conduct for declarations of interest and that it had no evidence bias has affected its decisions. ILSI said we operate within a framework of the highest principles of scientific integrity. One of the most controversial additives in UPF is the sweetener aspartame. 200 times sweeter than sugar, it has been heralded as a great lower-calorie alternative, turning once unhealthy sugary drinks, ice cream and mousses into products marketed as healthy. There have been questions about its potential harm over the past 2 decades. Then last month, the World Health Organization said although the evidence is not conclusive, it was concerned that long-term use of sweeteners like aspartame may increase the risk of type 2 diabetes, heart disease and mortality. In 2013, the European Food Safety Authority, EFSA, decided after looking at all the available evidence that aspartame was safe. The UK's Food Standards Agency accepted this position. The Committee on Toxicity looked at a study into aspartame in 2013 and concluded that the results did not indicate any need for action to protect the health of the public. 6 years later, Professor Alec Millstone, Emeritus Professor of Science Policy at the University of Sussex, decided to review the same evidence considered by EFSA to see who had funded the different studies. He discovered that 90% of the studies defending the sweetener were funded by large chemical corporations that manufacture and sell aspartame, and that all the studies suggesting that aspartame may cause harm were funded by non-commercial independent sources. A spokesperson for the Food and Drink Federation, a membership body for manufacturers, told the BBC that companies took the health of consumers and safety of the food they produce seriously and adhere to the strict regulations. The FSA says it will look into WHO's ongoing assessment of aspartame. The government says it is aware of the growing concerns about UPF and has ordered a review into the evidence on ultra-processed foods. A new business lobby group has been formed, boasting some of the UK's largest companies as its founding partners. The British Council has been launched by the British Chambers of Commerce, BCC, in a bid to design and drive the future of the business and British economy. Heathrow, BP, IHG Hotels and Resorts, and Drax are among its new members. It comes as the troubled CBI faces a crunch vote on its future after it was mired in serious sexual allegations. The CBI has been canvassing opinion from its existing membership on a series of reforms, the result of which will be revealed at a key meeting on Tuesday. It has received the public backing of 13 companies, including manufacturing giant Siemens and the world's largest computer software firm Microsoft, ahead of the vote. But the new group will be hoping to pick up the support of businesses which cut ties with the CBI, including household names such as John Lewis and BMW. The BCC works to support and connect tens of thousands of companies in the UK and internationally, and is known for putting out a quarterly economic survey. BCC Director General Siobhan Haviland and President Baroness Martha Lane Fox will join business leaders in London on Monday to discuss the work of its new council to represent the interests of UK firms. Over the past few months, we have been talking to the nation's largest corporates, and it has become clear to us that they are looking for a different kind of representation. These businesses want to be part of a framework that's rooted in their local communities, but with the ability to shape the national and international debate. Ms. Haviland said the Business Council would focus on an initiative directed at the future of the economy, targeting digital revolution, people and work, net zero global Britain and the high street. The new group will not know until Tuesday how much support its competitor will continue to receive, but the CBI's new Director General Rain Newson-Smith has described the vote as critical to its future. The BBC's business editor Simon Jack said the timing of the announcement from the BCC was hard to ignore, saying the launch represented a tussle for the trust of business and the ear of government. A CBI source said the timing of this is very opportunistic. Business succeeds through a collaborative approach, and we find that more effective. Over the weekend, the Sunday Times newspaper reported that the CBI's last Director General, Tony Danker, was planning to sue his former employer after he was forced out over the sexual misconduct allegations. A 9-year-old boy who was in an inflatable Zorb was seriously injured after he was reportedly lifted into the air by a gust of wind. The boy was taken by air ambulance to hospital from the Southport Food and Drink Festival at Victoria Park after the accident at around 2 p.m. Merseyside police said the boy's injuries were not believed to be life-threatening. Sefton Council said the event remained open after a health and safety check. First aid responders from St John Ambulance reacted quickly to provide assistance to the person involved prior to the arrival of other emergency services, a council spokesman said. Our thoughts are with those involved in the accident, and we wish them a full recovery. A Merseyside police spokesman said emergency services remain at the scene while the circumstances of this incident are investigated. Cleveland police said officers were called to the beach shortly after 1:30 p.m. in response to a person who had been found dead in the sea off Saltburn by paramedics who had responded to reports a body could be seen in the water. The force said the body of a female was recovered shortly after. Officers said formal identification had yet to take place, and their thoughts were with the person's family at this very difficult time. Police were unable to confirm if the person who died was a child or an adult. They were also unable to say if there had been reports of someone getting into difficulty in the water. The force said inquiries into the circumstances of the death were ongoing, and no further details have yet to be released. Saltburn is famous for its Victorian pier and attracts surfers all year round. A North East Ambulance Service spokesperson said, "We received a call to 999 at 1:35 p.m. to reports of a body recovered from the water. The Coast Guard attended the scene and we dispatched 2 double-crewed ambulances, a specialist paramedic and the air ambulance." Russian and Belarusian players fear they could miss Wimbledon because they are still waiting for UK visas. The All England club banned them from competing last year following Russia's invasion of Ukraine, which is supported by Belarus. They can compete this year but must sign declarations indicating their neutrality. The Home Office said applicants have to undergo thorough checks before permission to enter the UK is granted. Wimbledon takes place in London from the 3rd to the 16th of July. 16-year-old Russian Mira Andreeva, who had impressive runs at the Madrid Open and the French Open, said she is still waiting to see if she can play at the tournament. Andreeva applied for a visa more than 6 weeks ago, and it has still not been approved. Speaking on Saturday, Andreeva, who could be a candidate for a wildcard based on her performance in Paris, said, "Now I'm limited still in tournaments, so my next tournament has to be Wimbledon. But I don't get my visa yet, so we will see if I can participate in Wimbledon or not." Following Russia's invasion of Ukraine in February 2022, the UK government put in place a set of sanctions against the nation and its citizens. It includes visa-related measures, which includes reducing appointment capacity and more stringent checks for anyone applying. "We treat each application on a case-by-case basis, and all applications to enter the UK will be assessed on the merit," a Home Office spokesperson said. Applicants will have to submit their biometrics and undergo thorough checks before permission to enter the UK is granted. The government website states it takes 3 weeks to process an international sportsperson visa, but it can take longer. Russian world number 11 Karen Khachanov said it takes a much longer time to issue the documents, but added he already had a valid visa from previous years. After losing in the first round at Roland Garros, men's world number 2 Daniil Medvedev indicated he had doubts about his participation at Wimbledon by saying he would be happy if he was able to come to the UK for the grass court Grand Slam. Belarusian women's world number 2 Arina Sabalenka, who again did not know about Open News Conference after reaching the French Open quarterfinals, said in May she had not heard from her sponsor being approved. Russian player Anastasia Pavlyuchenkova, who is through to the last 8 at Roland Garros, is set to miss the tournament as her current world ranking of 333rd is not high enough to enter the main draw of qualifying. On her chances of a wild card after her run in Paris, she said, "Are you serious? Do you think about the situation last year they would give me a wild card this year?" Russian and Belarusian players have competed as neutral athletes on the ATP and WTA tours since the invasion began. As part of the conditions of playing at Wimbledon, players must agree not to support the Russian and Belarusian states or their regimes and leaders. They must also not receive funding from Russian or Belarusian states, including sponsorships from companies operated or controlled by them. An 11-year-old boy has been seriously hurt in a dog attack in Manchester. It happened on Sunday afternoon in Swanley Avenue, Monshall, and left the boy with injuries which were not life-threatening, according to Greater Manchester Police. A 35-year-old woman was arrested on suspicion of having a dog dangerously out of control, and the animal was also seized, officers said. Police have appealed for any CCTV, mobile or dashcam footage. Superintendent Nicola Williams said the awful attack had left the boy's family incredibly distressed. She added, "I understand the concerns an incident of this nature will cause in the wider community, and I want to reassure you we will carry out an extensive investigation into what has happened. The dog has been secured, and we have made an arrest of a woman who remains in police custody." Russia's defense ministry says it has thwarted a major Ukrainian offensive in Donetsk, claiming to have killed 250 troops and destroyed armoured vehicles. Video of what Russia says is that battles appears to show military vehicles coming under heavy fire in fields, but there has been no comment from Kyiv, and Russia's claim has not been independently verified. A Ukrainian counter-offensive has been long awaited, but Kyiv says it will not give advance warning of its start. It is too early to say whether this alleged offensive is the start of Kyiv's long-awaited counterpunch. However, with Ukraine claiming to have made marginal gains elsewhere on the front lines, there has been a notable increase in military activity. The Russian Defense Ministry said Ukraine had launched the large-scale offensive in the Donetsk region on Sunday, using 6 mechanized and 2 tank battalions. It claimed the Ukrainians tried to break through Russian defenses in what Kiev saw as the most vulnerable part of the front line, but that it did not achieve its tasks. It had no success. Moscow claimed Ukraine had lost 250 troops as well as 16 tanks. The footage featured masked and well-armed troops holding their fingers against their lips. The claims by Russia's defense ministry are not yet verified. If the footage of armoured vehicles coming under heavy fire is authentic, then it reflects the stiff resistance Ukrainian forces will face as they try to liberate more territory. And if it is not what it seems, it is still an attempt by Moscow to take control of the narrative. There has been a significant increase in Ukrainian messaging on when and how their much-anticipated counteroffensive could take shape. Ukraine has been planning a counteroffensive for months, but has wanted as much time as possible to train troops and to receive military equipment from Western allies. Officials in Kiev have warned against public speculation over the offensive, saying it could help the enemy. Plans love silence. There will be no announcement of the start, the Defense Ministry said in a video posted to Telegram on Sunday. Its footage featured masked and well-armed troops holding their fingers against their lips. It will take Ukraine time to achieve its goal of liberating territory taken by Russia as far back as 9 years ago, and Moscow has had time to prepare. It means if Ukraine is able to mount a counter-offensive, it is going to take a while. Much is at stake because the government in Kiev needs to show the people of Ukraine and Western allies that it can break through Russian lines and the effective military deadlock and recapture some of its sovereign territory. On Monday morning, the commander of Ukraine's ground forces, Alexander Syrsky, said troops were moving forward towards Bakhmut and had destroyed a Russian position near the city. Elsewhere, fighters opposed to the government in Moscow say they have captured some Russian soldiers in Belgorod, near the border with Ukraine. The claim was made by the Liberty of Russian Legion, FRL, which described the announcement as a joint statement with the Russian Volunteer Corps, RDK. Both groups want to topple President Vladimir Putin. They oppose the full-scale invasion of Ukraine that he launched in February last year. Belgorod's top official, Valenchka Gladkov, replied to say he had agreed to meet the men's captors if the soldiers were still alive, but the fighters later said that the government had not found the courage to meet them and they would hand over their captors to Ukraine. Russia has blamed Ukraine for recent attacks in its border territories, but Kiev denies being directly involved. Authorities in Belgorod said an energy plant was ablaze following a drone attack on Monday morning. And in Russia's Kaluga region, which borders the southern districts around Moscow, Governor Vladislav Shapsha said 2 drones fell onto a main road. Mr. Shapsha said there had not been an explosion and the area was now cordoned off. There has been no independent confirmation of either attack, but Moscow says the Belgorod region has been the regular target of drone attacks from Ukraine. At the train station in the eastern Ukrainian city of Dnipro, attendants in smart traditional uniforms help passengers down the steep carriage steps. Despite Russia's full-scale invasion, the trains here have never stopped running for the millions who rely on them. They board and take a journey people are being urged to avoid to the last stop before the eastern front line. As they weave past the protruding feet that line the stuffy sleeper carriage, it becomes clear this isn't just a route to the battlefield. Yes, there are soldiers, most look out the window, you wonder what they're thinking about, but there are also young families on their way back home. Victoria is heading back to the town of Povrovsk with her baby Eva. The 20-year-old tells them that she's had enough of avoiding the war, but isn't without worries. I've overcome them somehow, she says. It's impossible to live like this, wandering everywhere. We have to make it work at home. Since February last year, Victoria has travelled across Ukraine and Slovakia in an attempt to keep her and her daughter safe. After 3 hours of weaving through the rich green of Ukraine's countryside, they arrive in Pokrovsk, and Victoria is greeted by the husband she left behind. "I'm overwhelmed," says Serhiy, who was waiting patiently on the platform with a bunch of flowers. "I'm very glad to see my beautiful daughter and wife. I just want us to sit, cuddle, chat, and that's it." Arrivals like this are part of a broader trend in Ukraine after the devastating scenes of departure of last year. 6 million Ukrainians have since returned to their country. Of those, thousands are moving back to their homes across the 600-mile or 965-kilometre front line, where the threat of a Russian attack remains. Serhiy is one of many who stayed in Pokrovsk for his job at the local coal mine, an industry ingrained in the Donetsk region's DNA and a major employer here. Not only has it led to thousands staying, but it's also enticing people back with the offer of new jobs. In the early hours, miners move with urgency to shuttle buses that take them to the mine shaft. Even once they're 800 meters or 2,600 feet underground, it can take them up to an hour to walk to where they need to be. Volodymyr has worked here for 20 years. Stuffed down the front of his overalls is his packed lunch. They call their food torma zok in these parts, which means a break on their work at the mine. He and some colleagues are protected from mobilization because their roles are seen as critical. For Volodymyr, going to work is a balance between personal safety and simple economics. He must earn a living. When you go underground, you don't know what's happening above with the family. I'm often very worried. Pokrovsk's population is gradually rising, after dropping by 2/3 last year from 65,000. Svetlana, who works in the station control room, said when the war began in 2022, it was like an apocalypse. I had never seen so many people leave. Now it's become a destination for those escaping Russian occupation and fighting. It's a town very much on a war footing. The streets are filled with an even mix of civilians and soldiers. This area has seen a war since the onset of Russia's aggression 9 years ago. Another attraction is the restoration of power and water by local officials, despite their warnings for people to stay away. Pokrovsk is still comfortably in range of Russian multiple rocket launcher systems, MRLS. Scars around the town remind you of their indiscriminate threats. On the outskirts of Pokrovsk, closer to Russia's occupation, you find the town's last line of defense. Soldiers from the territorial defense keep a watchful eye towards the faint sounds of artillery. Their dutiful actions are allowing people to move back into harm's way, and there seems to be sympathy in the trenches. Some are saving their children, some stay because it's their homeland, says Vyacheslav. If you have to die, it's better to die in your motherland than somewhere abroad. A couple of days later, they rejoin Serhiy, Victoria and Eva at their flat. Watching them play with their daughter is a picture of innocence. Who knows when it will become safe here, asks Serhiy. Maybe a year, 2 or 5. We don't want to wait 5 years or even 1 year. They've clearly made peace with their decision to stay as a family despite the obvious risks. A move not just out of defiance, but from an acceptance too, that this war won't end soon. India's Rail Ministry has recommended that the country's top detective agency should investigate the deadly crash that killed 275 people. Railway Minister Ashwini Vaishnaw announced the decision but did not give more details. Railways-led investigations have already started and preliminary reports say a signal fault led to the crash. The 3-train collision on Friday night has been described as India's worst rail incident this century. More than 1,000 suffered injuries and were taken to hospitals. Some families are still searching for their loved ones. It's not clear why the Railway Board, the ministry's top decision-making body, has recommended a separate investigation by the Central Bureau of Investigation, CBI, when other inquiries have already started. The CBI investigates high-profile criminal causes, including serious financial frauds and murders. Mr. Vaishnaw said on Sunday that the root cause of the incident and people responsible for the criminal act have been identified. He added that a change in electronic interlocking was the likely cause of the accident. The minister urged people to wait for the final report. A report by the Commissioner of Railway Safety would be made public soon and it would reveal the cause, he said. Meanwhile, the railways said on Sunday that the Coromandel Express's engine and coaches crashed into a goods train due to a signal fault and the change in electronic interlocking. In railway signalling, the electronic interlocking system sets routes for each train in a set area, ensuring the safe movement of trains along the track. The impact of the crash threw coaches of the Coromandel Express onto a third track and they rammed into the rear carriages of the Bengaluru Howrah Superfast Express that was coming down the line at high speed. More than 3,000 passengers are thought to have been on board the two passenger trains. Atul Karwal, chief of the National Disaster Response Force, NDRF, said the force of the collision left several coaches crushed. Rescuers had to cut through the wreckage to reach the passengers. Hundreds of ambulances, doctors, nurses and rescue personnel were sent to the scene and worked for 18 hours to rescue passengers and pull out bodies. On Sunday night, Mr. Vaishnaw said train movement had been restored on the railway tracks where the accident took place. Reports say several passengers are still missing. Opposition leaders have called on Mr. Vaishnaw to take responsibility for the tragedy and resign. The ruling Bharatiya Janata Party has responded by asking them not to politicize the accident. How India train crash may have happened. 1. Coromandel Express heading south to Chennai and Howrah Superfast Express heading north within the 130km limit. 2. Coromandel Express leaves expected main route and joins loop line after signalling failure. It hits stationary goods train. 3. The Coromandel Express derails after impact. Rear of Howrah Superfast Express collides with derailed carriages. And 4. Some of Howrah Superfast Express carriages are also derailed. Relatives of the victims of Friday's deadly three-train crash in India have spoken of their continuing desperate efforts to find their loved ones. One woman looking for her adult son told the BBC she had travelled for 30 hours to the crash site, searching hospitals and morgues on the way. Officials said on Saturday that their rescue mission in Odisha had ended, but one eyewitness said he had seen a survivor retrieved the next morning. The latest death toll stands at 275. A signalling fault is emerging as the likely cause of the disaster, India's worst rail accident for decades. Lila Vati Devi broke down as she told the BBC on Sunday that she was still looking for a son, although other 8 members of her family who were on one of the trains had been located. I pray that we find him somewhere, one way or another, she said. There's nothing more I want. May God keep my son safe. Her son Raja Sahani, aged 22, was travelling along with relatives from their hometown in the northeastern state of Bihar to the affluent southern city of Bangalore, where they work odd jobs as daily wages. Travel involves changing trains in the city of Howrah, which is where they boarded the ill-fated train. Raja sent a photo of himself there. Hours after he departed, Lila Bharti got a call from another family member saying that there had been an accident. She tried Raja's phone repeatedly after that, but it was switched off. Her search had yielded nothing so far, she said. They spent 45,000 rupees or £438 hiring a car to make the journey, a cost well beyond their means. I have even looked in all hospitals and morgues here, but can't find him, she said. We asked the morgues to show photos of all the dead bodies over and over, but he's not there. Odisha state official Pradeep Jina told the BBC that at least 187 bodies remained unidentified. Officials were uploading pictures of the victims on government websites and would carry out DNA testing if needed. It's a real challenge for us, he said. Others too have been shuttling between the different temporary centres, looking at photos and hoping to get some news. Vishwanath Sathi told the AFP news agency that he was still looking for his 26-year-old son, who had been on his way to Chennai when the disaster occurred. I don't know if I'll find my son, he said, while waiting at a morgue, having inquired at every hospital he was able to. Despite railway officials saying on Saturday that all trapped and injured people at the site had been rescued, search efforts appear to have continued at the crash site. Journalist and author Sandeep Sahu told the BBC of a miraculous discovery on Sunday morning, when an injured survivor was pulled from the mangled wreckage and then rushed to hospital. He said dead bodies too were still being found and that he had seen 5 of these taken from the scene, 36 hours after the accident. These were placed in a nearby school that had been used as a temporary morgue. There was a horrifying moment when one of the victims' mobile phones rang, he said, but there was nobody to respond to the call. A woman once branded Australia's worst female serial killer has been pardoned after new evidence suggested she did not kill her 4 infant children. Kathleen Folbig spent 20 years in prison after a jury found she killed sons Caleb and Patrick and daughters Sarah and Laura over a decade, but a recent inquiry heard scientists believe they may have died naturally. The 55-year-old's case has been described as one of Australia's greatest miscarriages of justice. Miss Folbig, who has always maintained her innocence, was jailed for 25 years in 2003 for the murders of 3 of the children and the manslaughter of her first son, Caleb. Each child died suddenly between 1989 and 1999, aged between 19 days and 19 months, with prosecutors at her trial alleging she had smothered them. Previous appeals and a separate 2019 inquiry into the case found no grounds for reasonable doubt and gave greater weight to circumstantial evidence in Miss Folbig's original trial. But at the fresh inquiry, headed by retired Judge Tom Bathurst, prosecutors accepted that research on gene mutations had changed their understanding of the children's deaths. New South Wales Attorney General Michael Daly on Monday announced that Mr. Bathurst had come to the firm view there was reasonable doubt that Miss Folbig was guilty of each offence. As a result, the NSW governor had signed a full pardon and ordered Miss Folbig's immediate release from prison. It has been a 20-year-long ordeal for her. I wish her peace, Mr. Daly said, adding his thoughts were also with Craig Folbig, the children's father. At the 2022 inquiry, Mr. Folbig's lawyers pointed to the fundamental implausibility of 4 children from one family dying of natural causes under the age of 2. The unconditional pardon does not quash Miss Folbig's convictions, Mr. Daly said. That would be a decision for the Court of Criminal Appeal if Mr. Bathurst chooses to refer the case to it, a process which could take up to a year. If her convictions are overturned, she could then potentially sue the government for millions of dollars in compensation. Alternatively, she could receive a settlement similar to that of Lindy Chamberlain, who was awarded $1.3 million, or £690,000, or $858,000 in 1992 for her wrongful conviction over the death of her daughter Azaria. But some advocates say the case of Miss Chamberlain, imprisoned for 3 years, pales in comparison with Miss Folbig's. It is implausible to comprehend the injury that has been inflicted upon Kathleen Folbig, the pain of losing her children, and close to 2 decades locked away in maximum security prisons, for crimes which science has proved never occurred, said her lawyer Rani Rigo. Miss Folbig was met at prison gates by friends involved in the years-long campaign for her freedom, and Mr. Daly appealed privacy so he can move on with her life. Miss Folbig's 2003 trial centred on circumstantial evidence, most notably diaries which expressed her struggles with motherhood, but there was no physical evidence of smothering or injuries to the children presented to the trial. At the recent inquiry, experts suggested the diaries were a coping mechanism written by a grieving mother with limited support, and that it would be unlikely all 4 children could be smothered without a trace. But the key evidence was from a team of immunologists who found Miss Folbig's daughters, Lara and Sarah, shared a genetic mutation called CARM2G11-4R that can cause sudden cardiac death. Evidence was also uncovered that her sons Caleb and Patrick possessed a different genetic mutation linked to sudden onset epilepsy in mice. Professor Carola Venusa, who led the research team from the Australian National University, said an unusual genetic sequence was immediately obvious in Miss Folbig's DNA before the children's samples were even tested. We did the first test and found a gene variant that looked very suspicious, even then in November 2018 we thought this a very high likelihood, if found in the children, to be the culprit. Professor Venusia said there were only 134 known cases worldwide of the potentially deadly heart condition linked to the genetic mutations. She described the decision to pardon Miss Folbig as a beautiful moment that could offer hope to other women in similar situations. We've been approached about women who have lost children or who have been accused of inflicting harm, and the cases look as if they're also children with severe genetic conditions, she said. The Australian Academy of Science says the case shows the need for reform that makes the legal system more science-sensitive, a call echoed by Miss Folbig's lawyer. Police in Hong Kong have detained several pro-democracy activists on the anniversary of the Tiananmen Square massacre. Authorities have banned public commemoration of the 1989 incident, which saw China crush peaceful protests in Beijing with tanks and troops. However, candlelit vigils have been taking place in other cities worldwide. Among those detained was 67-year-old Alexandra Wong, a prominent campaigner nicknamed Grandma Wong. Amid a tense evening in Hong Kong, she was arrested while carrying flowers near Victoria Park, where vigils had been held for decades. The leader of one of Hong Kong's main opposition parties was among them arrested. Chang Po-ying, a veteran pro-democracy activist who heads the League of Social Democrats party, was holding an LED candle and 2 flowers. Mak Ying-ting, former head of the Hong Kong Journalists Association, was also detained and subsequently released. Police later said they had made 1 arrest and taken 23 people to police stations for investigation. The UN High Commissioner on Human Rights, Volker Turk, said on Twitter that he was alarmed by the detentions and called for the release of anyone detained for exercising freedom of expression and peaceful assembly. Events to mark the 1989 massacre in Beijing are banned in mainland China. For decades, Hong Kong was the only Chinese city where these commemorations were allowed, under the city's semi-autonomous economic, political and legal setup, known as One Country, Two Systems, established when the city handed over to China by the UK in 1997. But public events to mark the anniversary have since been outlawed after the Chinese government imposed a strict national security law outlawing many forms of dissent in 2020. The annual commemorations have not been held since 2019, after being initially banned under Hong Kong's COVID regulations. This year, a pro-Beijing carnival is being held in Victoria Park instead. Miss Wong was quickly surrounded by police and driven away on Sunday in the city's Causeway Bay area. Nearby, Victoria Park has hosted annual candlelit vigils to mark Tiananmen Square since 1990, often drawing tens of thousands of people to mark the day known as June 4th in much of China. Hong Kong police have deployed thousands of officers at key sites in the city, stopping people to search and question them. Officers set up booths outside the metro station near Victoria Park to search passers-by, including journalists. 2 Chinese-made saber-toothed tiger armoured vehicles have also been stationed in the area in what appears to be a show of force by police. Ahead of anticipated protests, the city's government has also removed books on the Tiananmen crackdown from public libraries. One of those detained was a woman who shouted, "Raise candles, mourn 64, while another was a man carrying a book with the title May 35th, both references to the 4th June date of the killings. Others have been detained while holding unlit candles or wearing yellow clothing, the colour of the now dismantled pro-democracy movement. On Saturday, 4 people were arrested on suspicion of disturbing order in a public place or acting with seditious intent, both new offences under the controversial 2020 law. Dozens of candlelit vigils have been taking place around the world on Sunday to remember those killed by the Chinese military in response to the crackdown. In Taiwan, the democratic self-governing island China claims as its territory and has vowed to take control of by force if necessary, hundreds of people gathered to mark the anniversary. Chants of "Fight Freedom, Stand with Hong Kong" were heard from the crowds in the capital Taipei, who had set up a replica of the Pillar of Shame, a famous statue at the University of Hong Kong commemorating the dead at Tiananmen Square that was removed in 2021. Many involved also hope the vigils will continue the spirit of Hong Kong's once vibrant civil society and political community, which has now largely fallen silent because so many have been imprisoned under the national security law, or have left Hong Kong altogether. The Tiananmen Square protests in Beijing became the focus for national demonstrations, calling for greater political freedoms in 1989. Thousands of people, the majority of which were students, camped for weeks in the iconic Beijing Square before the military moved in on the 4th of June and opened fire. One unidentified protester became an international symbol of protest for blocking an advancing column of tanks in footage that was seen around the world. The Chinese government says 200 civilians and several dozen security personnel died. Other estimates have ranged from hundreds to as many as 10,000. The actions of the authorities have been seen by activists as part of China's broader agenda to snuff out political dissent in Hong Kong. Oil prices have risen after Saudi Arabia said it would make cuts of 1 million barrels per day, BPD, in July. Other members of OPEC Plus, a group of oil-producing countries, also agreed to continued cuts in production in an attempt to shore up flagging prices. OPEC Plus accounts for around 40% of the world's crude oil, and its decisions can have a major impact on oil prices. In Asia, trade on Monday, Brent crude oil rose by as much as 2.4%, before settling at around $77 a barrel. OPEC Plus said production targets would drop by a further 1.4 million BPD from 2024. The 7-hour-long meeting on Sunday of the oil-rich nations came against a backdrop of falling energy prices. Oil prices soared when Russia invaded Ukraine last year, but are now back at levels seen before the conflict began. In October last year, OPEC Plus, a formulation which refers to the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries and its allies, agreed to cut production by 2 million BPD, about 2% of global demand. In April this year, the group agreed to further cuts, which were due to last to the end of this year, but Russian Deputy Prime Minister Alexander Novak said that Sunday's talks led to the extension of the deal until the end of 2024. On Sunday, Saudi Energy Minister Prince Abdulaziz bin Salman said that his country's cut of 1 million BPD could be extended beyond July if needed. This is a Saudi lollipop, he said, in what is seen as a bid to stabilise the market. Before the two-day OPEC Plus meeting started, it was widely expected that the oil cartel would make production cuts to prop up prices. It appears most members were against the idea, as any cuts would impact oil revenues, which are crucial to keep running their economies. Saudi Arabia's decision to make a voluntary reduction of 1 million barrels per day was unexpected but does not come as a huge surprise. As the leader of the pack and also the largest exporter of oil, it was the only one in a position to be able to lower output. From Riyadh's point of view, it is crucial the price of crude remains over $80 a barrel for it to break even. Saudi officials want elevated prices to keep spending billions of dollars on ambitious projects, spearheaded by Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, as he tries to diversify the kingdom's economy away from oil. The move by the Saudis also underlines the uncertain outlook for demand for fuels in the months to come. Concerns about the global economy, especially recessionary fears in the US and Europe, are expected to put further pressure on crude prices. Oil producers are grappling with failing prices and high market volatility amid the Russian invasion of Ukraine. The West has accused OPEC of manipulating prices and undermining the global economy through high energy costs. It has also accused the group of siding with Russia despite sanctions over the invasion of Ukraine. In response, OPEC insiders have said that the West's monetary policy over the last decade has driven inflation and forced oil-producing nations to act to maintain the value of their main exports. Every year, countries pledge to cut their greenhouse gas emissions in an effort to curb the impacts of climate change, but still global temperatures keep rising. Just last month, scientists announced that average global temperatures would likely pass the 1.5 centigrade threshold for the first time in the next 5 years. As temperatures rise, the world will see more devastating heat waves, wildfires and floods. The question now is whether the world could stop at 1.5 centigrade. On Monday, countries meet for the Bonn Climate Conference to discuss their pledges and look ahead to the next big UN climate conference, COP28, which opens in Dubai in November. So which countries are on track with their climate commitments to help and stick to the 1.5 degrees and which are not? Hundreds of thousands of protesters have gathered in Warsaw for one of Poland's largest demonstrations since the fall of communism in 1989. Most opposition parties have called on supporters to join the march against the Nationalist Law and Justice Party, PIS, led by Jarosław Kaczyński. Among those attending are former Prime Minister Donald Tusk and former President Lech Walesa. The PIS has condemned the gathering as a march of hate. The Mayor's Office for Warsaw has estimated 500,000 people attended the event, which fell on the 34th anniversary of Poland's first partially free elections. Many travelled from across the country to take part, and simultaneous demonstrations have been held in other Polish cities like Krakow. A wide variety of issues brought protests together, including frustrations over inflation, cost of living and rights for women and LGBT. Concerns have also been raised against new laws accused of undermining Poland's democracy. The law, criticised by the EU and US, sets up a commission to investigate undue Russian influence in Polish politics and has the power to ban people from assuming public office for 10 years. The government denies it is subverting democracy, and President Andrzej Duda has proposed amendments to remove these powers. But critics say it could still be used against people, including Mr. Tusk, Poland's main opposition leader and head of the centrist Civic Platform (PO) party. Opponents say it could also bolster the PIS standing in this year's parliamentary elections. Crowds of people have been pictured waving Polish and EU flags and holding placards, and participants told the BBC that protesters were chanting "Democracy" and "We will win." "I came here to defend democracy because I can't stand how our parliament, the constitutional tribunal, are destroyed. The European Union is diminished," one protester told Reuters news agency. Donald Tusk, a former head of the European Council, also welcomed supporters during the record march. "Democracy dies in silence, but you've raised your voice for democracy today. Silence is over, we will shout," said Mr. Tusk. Ahead of the event, the PIS accused organisers of hypocrisy, tweeting a video that policed brutality and violence against the media while Mr. Tusk was in office. Wojciech Pawlicki, editor of Visegrad Insight, told the BBC that these protests show Poland's opposition groups can unite over common causes despite their political differences, but PIS is still ahead in opinion polls. He adds, and this is going to mobilise them because they know the opposition is for real. China's defense ministry has said war with the US would be an unbearable disaster for the world in his first major speech since taking on the role. At a security summit, General Li Shangfu said some countries were intensifying an arms race in Asia, but he said the world was big enough for both China and the US, and the two superpowers should seek common ground. Earlier, the US alleged unsafe maneuvers by a Chinese destroyer near a US warship in the Taiwan Strait. On Saturday, the US Navy said a Chinese destroyer sailed in an unsafe manner near an American warship as it transited the Taiwan Strait with Canadian vessels. China criticised both countries for deliberately provoking risk. The US and Canada said they were sailing where international law allows. Gen Li, who became defense ministry in March, accused the US of a Cold War mentality and said this was greatly increasing security risks. In his speech, he said China would not allow naval patrols by the US and its allies to be a pretext to exercise hegemony of navigation. Asked about the incident in the Taiwan Strait, he said only that countries from outside the region were raising tensions. He was speaking at the Shangri-La Dialogue in Singapore, the Asia-Pacific region's only annual security meeting. Beijing has rejected a US request for direct military talks in protest at sanctions placed on Jen Li by the US in 2018 over weapons purchases from Russia. At the Singapore summit, US Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin rebuked China for refusing to hold military discussions. Jen Austin and Jen Li shook hands and briefly spoke at the event's opening dinner on Friday, but there was no substantive exchange, reports say. The Chinese defense minister's moderate tone signals that talks with his US counterpart are possible, but Washington has to lift sanctions against him, said Zhao Bo, a retired officer of the People's Liberation Army. Jen Li was sanctioned in 2018 over the acquisition of military hardware from Russia. His 5-year term as defense minister started earlier this year, but the sanctions prevent him from travelling to the US and also make it difficult for him to invite Jen Austin to China, Mr. Zhao added. If the sanction is there, how can we talk? The sanctions are very much consequential, said Mr. Zhao, now a senior fellow at Tsinghua University's Center for International Security and Strategy in Beijing. Senior intelligence officials attended a meeting of spy chiefs at the Singapore summit, according to Reuters. Despite the diplomatic spat, a top US State Department official has arrived in Beijing for a week of wide-ranging talks. Relations between Washington and Beijing have been strained in recent years over several issues, including China's claim over Taiwan and territorial disputes in the South China Sea. A senior PLA official, Lieutenant General Xing Jinping, said there was no room for compromise on Taiwan as he accused the US of meddling in the region. Washington's decision to increase the number of troops on rotational deployment in the region could heighten the risk of confrontation, he told Reuters on the sidelines of the summit. Police in Japan have arrested a YouTuber and former MP over threats he allegedly made to celebrities. Yoshikazu Higashinani, known on YouTube as Gasei, is famous for his celebrity gossip videos. Local media said he returned to Japan from the UAE 2 months after Tokyo police issued his arrest warrant. He is accused of threatening to defame an actor, an entrepreneur and a designer between February and August last year. He's also suspected of obstructing the designer's business activities. Mr. Higashitani repeatedly ignored requests to return to Japan and voluntarily submit himself to police questioning. Tokyo police had been sending investigators to the UAE since May and urging authorities there to extradite him to Japan. Japan's foreign ministry ordered him to return his passport after Tokyo police obtained his arrest warrant in March, but Mr. Higashitani said he'd lost it. His passport expired the following month. Earlier this year, he became the first lawmaker in Japanese history to be kicked out of parliament without ever entering it. Mr. Higashitani was one of 2 members elected from the Shika Joshi 48 Party, a single-issue party calling for reforms to Japan's public broadcaster. During his 7 months in office, the social media personality refused to leave his home in Dubai and did not attend a single legislative session. At the time, Japanese media reported that he'd refused to attend Parliament because he feared being arrested over fraud allegations and defamation claims from celebrities. Legislators demanded that Mr. Higashitani fly to Tokyo to deliver an in-person apology in the chamber for his absence, but he failed to show up at the plenary session. Instead, he announced on his YouTube channel that he was going to Turkey and that he was planning to donate his salary to the Turkish earthquake relief. His absence angered the Senate, whose members unanimously voted for his expulsion. AC Milan's Zlatan Ibrahimovic has retired from football at the age of 41. bringing to an end one of modern era's most glittering careers. I say goodbye to football, but not to you, the Swede told the San Siro crowd after Sunday's last game of the season. Ibrahimovic had already announced he would leave the Italian club. He scored 511 goals for clubs including Paris Saint-Germain, Manchester United and both AC and Inter Milan, winning league titles in 4 countries. Ibrahimovic began his second spell with AC Milan in early 2020, having won the Scudetto with them in 2011 and helped them win the title again last season. But he played only 4 times and started 1 match from the Serie A side this term and scored 1 goal following a series of injuries, and his contract was set to expire this month. There are too many emotions for me right now, Forza Milan and goodbye, an emotional Ibrahimovic said, holding back tears. The first time I came here, you gave me happiness. The second time, you gave me love. You welcomed me with open arms. You made me feel at home. I will be a Milanistra for the rest of my life. Ibrahimovic won 34 trophies, including 14 league titles, in a career that began in the last century, and was nominated for the Ballon d'Or 11 times. The one major club trophy that eluded him was the Champions League, with his only European title coming with Manchester United in the shape of the 2017 Europa League. The striker also retires as Sweden's all-time top scorer, with 62 international goals in 122 matches. He quit the international side after Euro 2016, but returned in 2021 for their unsuccessful World Cup qualifying campaign. I used to be scared when journalists asked about my future, but now I can accept it. I'm ready, he told reporters after his announcement. I've been doing this all my life. Football made me a man. It allowed me to know people I otherwise would never have known. I've travelled the world thanks to football. It's all thanks to football. A career laced with gold. Ibrahimovic started his professional career with hometown side Malmö FF in 1999, before moving to Ajax in 2001 for a 3-year spell in which he won 3 league titles. A move to Italy followed in 2004 with Juventus, where he won 2 league titles, both which were later stripped from the club as a result of the Calciopoli scandal. However, the Swede won 3 more Serie A titles with his next club, Inter Milan, before a move to Barcelona in 2009. Ibrahimovic spent only 1 season at the Catalan club, winning a La Liga title before being loaned to AC Milan, a move which was made permanent in 2011. A year later, however, and Ibrahimovic was on the move again, signing for Paris Saint-Germain, where he scored 113 goals in 122 league appearances and won 4 League One trophies. In July 2016, he signed for Manchester United for a 2-year spell with a Premier League club that saw him win the League Cup and the Europa League. Ibrahimovic signed for MLS side LA Galaxy in 2018, spending 2 seasons in California before making his return to AC Milan. An average 2-year fixed-rate mortgage deal is £35 a month more expensive than a few weeks ago, new figures show. The interest charge has gone up by 0.3% since recent data, showing inflation not coming down as quickly as expected, financial data firm Moneyfacts said. The surprise led many to predict the Bank of England will raise rates higher than previously thought, from their current 4.5% to as high as 5.5%. It has prompted many lenders to raise mortgage rates and also remove deals. Hundreds of mortgage deals have now been pulled from the market as lenders reassess their offers. Over the weekend, several lenders made changes to their mortgage deals, which are expected to further squeeze the budgets of households and firms. On Friday, TSB withdrew all of its 10-year fixed deal rates with less than 3 hours' notice in a move first reported by The Times. The bank insisted the move was temporary and that the deals would return. Santander's new business mortgage rates increased between 0.05% and 0.43% on Monday, and Coventry Building Society is hiking its 2-, 3- and 5-year deals on Tuesday. According to Moneyfacts, the average 2-year fixed rate on a £200,000 mortgage over a 25-year term is now 5.64%. That compares with 5.34% before the latest inflation data. The Bank of England has been steadily raising interest rates, for the last year and a half as it tries to tackle soaring prices. People on a variable rate or tracker will have been affected immediately by the rate increases, but many of those on fixed rate deals will not have felt the pain yet. Sarah Coles, head of personal finance at Hargreaves Lansdown, said millions of people were now facing a remortgage nightmare. They've been shielded from the horror of rate hikes so far by a fixed mortgage, and when their deal runs out, they face the full force of the rises in one single hit. Inflation shows the rate at which prices are rising. The rate has shot up over the past 18 months as food and energy bills have soared, leaving many households feeling squeezed. Last month's data showed the rate of inflation fell to 8.7% in the year to April, down from 10.1% in March, but above the 8.2% figure expected. What happens if you miss a mortgage payment? A shortfall equivalent to 2 or more months' repayments means you are officially in arrears. Your lender must then treat you fairly by considering any requests about changing how you pay, perhaps with lower repayments for a shorter period. Any arrangement you come to will be reflected on your credit file, affecting your ability to borrow money in the future. Last week, the Nationwide warned that rises in mortgage interest rates could hit the housing market. The Building Society's comments came as its latest data indicated UK house prices fell at their fastest annual pace for nearly 14 years in May. It added that headwinds to the housing market look set to strengthen in the near term. A drop in house prices would generally be welcomed by first-time buyers who have watched property values continue to climb in recent years, even during the pandemic. However, rising interest rates means that mortgage costs are now higher than many people looking to get on the housing ladder might have planned for. Twitter has snapped up senior NBC Universal executive Joe Baranok as Elon Musk continues to shake up the social media platform's top team. Mr. Baranok starts the role on Monday, focusing on business operations. It comes less than a month after NBC Universal's head of advertising, Linda Yaccarino, was named as Twitter's new chief executive. She will take the position currently held by Mr. Musk, who will remain closely involved in the company. Mr. Baranok has already updated his LinkedIn profile, indicating that he will be based at Twitter's New York office. He also posted an announcement about his move that said, "I'm looking forward to bringing my experience to Twitter and to working with the entire team to build Twitter 2.0 together." On Twitter, Ms. Yaccarino said, "Welcome to the flock at Baranok, Joe, from one bird to the next." In his last job, Mr. Baranok was the Executive Vice President for Communications, Advertising and Partnerships at NBC Universal. Earlier in his career, he worked at social media giant Facebook. Late last week, reports emerged that Twitter's second head of trust and safety under owner Elon Musk has resigned. Ella Irwin took the post when previous head Yoel Ruth left in November 2022, a month after Mr. Musk took over the company. The head of trust and safety is tasked with content moderation, a topic which has come under the spotlight since Mr. Musk's takeover of the firm. The reason for Ms. Irwin's resignation is unclear. However, it came a day after Mr. Musk publicly criticized a content moderation decision made at Twitter. Since buying Twitter for $44 billion or £34.4 billion, Mr. Musk had been under pressure to find someone else to lead the firm and refocus his attention on his other businesses, which include electric car maker Tesla and rocket firm SpaceX. Mr. Musk named Ms. Yaccarino as Twitter's new chief executive last month. The world's richest man said she would start in 6 weeks and oversee business operations at the platform, which has been struggling to make money. Mr. Musk said he would stay involved in the platform as executive chairman and chief technology officer. "30 people could be paid £1,600 a month without any obligation under proposals for the first trial of a universal basic income in England. Researchers from think tank Autonomy are seeking financial backing for a 2-year pilot programme to see how it would change the lives of the group. Supporters say schemes can simplify the welfare system and tackle poverty. Participants will be drawn from Central Jarrow in North East England and East Finchley in North London. The concept of a universal basic income sees governments pay all individuals a set salary regardless of their means. Critics of universal basic income say it would be extremely costly, would divert funding away from public services, and not necessarily help to alleviate poverty. Autonomy said it hopes its proposed pilot will make the case for a national basic income and more comprehensive trials to fully understand the potential of a basic income in the UK. No one should ever be facing poverty, having to choose between heating and eating in one of the wealthiest countries in the world, said Cleo Goodman, co-founder of Basic Income Conversation, a program run by the work-focused think tank. Will Strong, director of research at Autonomy, said all the evidence shows that a UBI would directly alleviate poverty and boost millions of people's well-being. The potential benefits are just too large to ignore. Autonomy's trial is being supported by charity Big Local and Northumbria University. 2 years of community consultation has taken place in Central Jarrow and East Finchley. Anyone from the areas is able to put themselves forward to take part and can remain anonymous. While participants will be drawn randomly, the organisers plan for it to be a representative group and to be made up of 20% of people with disabilities. On top of the £1.15 million budget for the basic income payments over 2 years, there will be further costs of about £500,000 for the project's evaluation activities, admin and community support teams. Autonomy says if funding for income payments was secured, it would most likely come from private philanthropic sources or local or combined authorities. There have been previous calls for a universal basic income to be used to alleviate financial hardships experienced in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic, and last year the Welsh Labour government announced a £20 million experiment offering a universal basic income to young people leaving care. The plan would give £1,600 a month before tax to 500 care leavers, a sum roughly in line with the living wage. The scheme is ongoing and the Welsh Government said the results would be thoroughly evaluated. Almost £9 billion in old banknotes have not been cashed in across the UK, even though paper £20 and £50 notes have stopped being legal tender in October. Paper banknotes have been replaced with plastic notes with a series of security features. The Bank of England said the withdrawn banknotes could still be deposited or exchanged. There are also £87 million of old £1 coins that have yet to be returned, according to the Royal Mint. Details of the cash still in circulation or hiding in homes was revealed in Freedom of Information requests by BBC Wales. The Bank of England said 445 million paper banknotes remained in circulation. 111 million £5 notes, 65 million £10 notes, 198 million £20 notes, and 70 million £50 notes. Paper £5 notes were withdrawn in May 2017 and the paper £10 notes in March 2018. In addition to the paper cash, the Royal Mint, which is based in Llantrisant, Rhondda Cynon Taf, said about 87 million old-style £1 coins had not been returned. However, about 18 million had not been returned over the past year. Out of the 1.6 billion that have been returned, about 1.8 million were counterfeits. The round £1 coin was replaced by the 12-sided version in October 2017. The old-style coin can still be deposited at the post office, but cannot be spent. According to the Royal Mint, owned by the UK Treasury, about 138 million round £1 coins have been melted down to make some of the new ones. The polymer £50 note, featuring the portrait of Alan Turing, entered circulation on June 23rd, 2021. Meaning the Bank of England's entire collection of currently printed banknotes is made of plastic. While the paper notes are no longer legal tender, a Bank of England spokeswoman said all genuine banknotes that have been withdrawn from circulation retain their face value. They can be returned to banks and some post offices, but the latter will only exchange a maximum of £300. People can also post old notes to the Bank of England in Threadneedle Street in the City of London to be paid into a bank account by cheque, or if you live in the UK and your exchange is worth up to £300, swap for new style polymer ones. All notes can also be taken there in person, but the bank warns of long waiting times. The use of cash fell sharply during the coronavirus pandemic as lockdowns reduced options for spending. This accelerated a downward trend for the use of notes and coins. However, cash still accounted for 15% of all payments in 2022, according to the latest available figures by banking trade body UK Finance, making it the second most popular way to pay after debit cards. Searching for a new mortgage is time-consuming when you have a demanding job, a new baby to care for, and a Victorian home to renovate. Last time we looked properly, the repayment had pretty much redoubled from £850 or £900 a month, says Ian Thraki. It's terrifying, quite honestly. Ian's 5-year fixed-rate deal expires at the end of the year, and the blacksmith and his partner, who is currently on maternity leave, find themselves, like so many others, in a very difficult situation. They have been paying £450 a month for their terraced home in Blandford, Forum, Dorset. From August, when his partner returns to work, they need to factor in a monthly childcare bill of £600, and with Ian being self-employed, his wages fluctuate. There have been times on my way home from work when I've looked at the ads for Aldi, Lidl and Tesco, and at £14 an hour, it's really tempting. If I had to give up being a blacksmith, then I will, the 39-year-old says. The craftsman is not alone. Many are facing similar financial dilemmas as they are contemplating rising mortgage costs. The Bank of England have been steadily raising interest rates for the last year and a half as it tries to tackle soaring prices. After figures last week showed inflation not coming down as quickly as expected, many people now predict the central bank will continue to raise rates from their current level of 4.5% to as high as 5.5%. That in turn has an immediate impact on the mortgage market. Lenders began raising their rates, according to financial data firm Moneyfacts. The average 2-year fixed-rate mortgage is now 5.49%, and the average 5-year fixed is currently 5.17%. And within a week, hundreds of mortgage deals were removed from the market as lenders reassessed their offers. Carnage is how Craig Fish from Lodestone Brokers in London described the situation. I'm currently on hold to NatWest 30 minutes and counting to discuss a possible new mortgage, as they've just announced they are withdrawing rates at 10:30 p.m. tonight. Do the lenders think the future is this uncertain? He said earlier this week. Jo Wilder, aged 28, works for Cardiff Council and pays £700 a month for a studio apartment she has been renting out for the past 18 months. She now wants to buy her own home, a process that is taking longer than she hopes, as she watches rates rise. Despite having a healthy 20% deposit and a mortgage in principle, she says there are not really any properties on the market. Repayments on a 3-year fixed-rate deal at 4.5% would be between £500 and £600, but she is worried about interest rates going up. It's not ideal, I'm just going to have to wait it out and hope rates come down. It really is very stressful, she says. Jo had hoped getting her own place would mean a drop in monthly outgoings, but with the rising food prices, she no longer thinks that will be the case. It is disheartening, she adds. The way things are going, I think it is actually going to be the same price, which is pretty daunting to be honest. In Bedfordshire, Anthony Jones and his wife have a 14-month-old daughter they want to upsize and have been trying to sell since last August. The couple's 5-year fixed deal has ended and they are now on a tracker mortgage, leaving them £200 worse off a month at a little over £1,200. It's a bit of a nightmare, says Anthony. We're looking at upsizing it and all of a sudden are having to question the affordability of it. The 33-year-old says when they first put their house on the market, there had been a lot of interest initially. Then all of a sudden we had people saying our mortgage offer had been pulled and we can't afford it anymore. The couple have been reduced to asking the price from £300,000 to £275,000, but they say they cannot accept less because otherwise they will not have the deposit for their second home. Our daughter has grown so quickly, we need a garden and bigger bedrooms and more storage. The lack of space is even causing arguments between me and my partner. The upheaval for people going through the application process comes as Bank of England figures this week showed a decline in the number of mortgages being approved. The number of net mortgage approvals for house purchases fell to 48,700 in April from 51,500 in March. Mortgage broker London & Country is now seeing a trend for people fixing for 1 or 2 years, rather than the previous most popular 5-year term, on the basis that interest rates will have fallen by the time they come to look for their next deal. Spokesman David Hollingworth says people who are refinancing should start searching for a new product 6 months before the end of their current deal. Some may want to consider taking out new mortgages over a longer term, something a lot of first-time buyers do to give themselves breathing space, he says. If it is a struggle to meet payments on an existing mortgage, there is also the option of extending the term, but Mr. Hollingworth says this is not a move to be taken lightly, because it will significantly increase the overall interest bill by tens of thousands of pounds. Diesel prices fell by a record 12 pence per litre on average in the UK last month, according to the RAC. Pump prices dropped from around £1.59 to £1.47, the group said, cutting the cost of filling up a family car by £6.50. The RAC said the reduction was the largest monthly drop it had seen since it began monitoring prices in 2000. But the motoring group argued the drop in price was both long overdue and smaller than it should be due to wholesale prices being lower. The British Retail Consortium, which represents supermarkets, said big cuts had been made to diesel prices in response to falling wholesale costs. Diesel prices are now down more than 25% from 2022 highs after falling for 7 months in a row. The fuel hit a £1.99 per litre high last summer after oil prices soared following Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Petrol prices have also been steadily falling since then and dropped from £1.46 to £1.43 on average last month, figures from the RAC said. The motoring group has suggested that prices have not come down as fast or by as much as they should have, noting that prices were significantly lower in Northern Ireland. The RAC said the cut should have been more significant to fully reflect changes in the wholesale market, because diesel wholesale costs have been lower than petrol for 10 weeks. In May, the Competition and Markets Authority, CMA, announced it was investigating fuel prices and whether a failure in competition had meant drivers overpaid. The watchdog said it was concerned about the sustained higher margins on diesel compared to petrol so far this year. It said evidence it had gathered so far suggested at least one supermarket had set a higher target for its profit margins on fuel prices in 2022, which could have led rivals to follow suit and raise prices too. The RAC said after calling for prices to fall in recent months, it seemed ironic that the latest price cuts have finally come in the 2 weeks following the Competition and Markets Authority's announcement. What's happened to the price of diesel in May will no doubt give the CMA something to think about, Mr. Williams said. We strongly hope the pump price reductions continue as they should. Gordon Bulmer, Executive Director of the Petrol Retailers Association, which represents thousands of independent forecourts, said its advice to drivers was to shop around. As noted by the CMA, petrol and diesel prices are still volatile due to the ongoing war in Ukraine. The market is very dynamic and independent forecourts are in many cases undercutting supermarkets on price, he added. A separate review of the fuel market has been ongoing for several months over initial concerns that retailers and forecourts were failing to pass on a 5 pence fuel duty cut to motorists. The engineering giant Siemens, Microsoft and oil firm Esso have signed a letter backing the CBI ahead of a crunch vote on its future. The firms are among 13 signatories of a letter seen by the BBC, giving the business group a mandate to continue. The CBI is fighting for its survival after claims of sexual misconduct against staff led to an exodus of members including John Lewis and BMW. Results of the critical vote will be revealed next week. The ballot on a programme of change is likely to be seen as a key moment for the organisation's future. Asked if the lobby group would shut down in the event it lost support, the CBI's Director General Ray Newton-Smith told the BBC's Sunday with Laura Kuenssberg it was a really nerve-wracking time. But Ms Newton-Smith, who has described the vote as critical, said she was absolutely determined that we would lead this programme of change, so that the CBI could be a collective voice for business. It's been absolutely devastating to read about some of these instances, and I hope we are emerging from what has been a really deep and painful crisis for us. The CBI, the Confederation of British Industry, is one of the UK's most prominent lobby groups. Its role is to speak to the government on behalf of around 190,000 businesses, which employ millions of people, and share best practice. But in April, after allegations of harassment and sexual assault emerged, including 2 claims of rape, one at a summer party held in 2019, and another at an overseas office, some big household names cut ties with the group. The City of London Police is currently investigating the rape allegations. Some members, such as Tesco and Sainsbury's, have suspended engagement with the group, and the government have also paused its activities with the CBI, with Chancellor Jeremy Hunt stating that there was no point working with it when its own members have deserted it. Following an investigation by law firm Fox Williams, the CBI announced a programme of change last week, which has been put to remaining members to vote on. The reforms are designed to restore trust in the body and include a refresh of the CBI board and the creation of a new committee to focus on people and human resource matters. There will also be staff cuts. The letter signed by the firms backing the troubled lobby group is expected to be published in Monday's Times newspaper. We believe that the CBI has recognised its failings and has a robust action plan in place to be delivered by a new leadership team, the letter says. We're backing the CBI to change and move forward, and this group will vote to give the organisation a mandate to continue. This is not a blank cheque, and we will hold the CBI to account in delivering on its action plan. Carl Ennis, chief executive of Siemens in Britain and Ireland, said the firm believed the UK needed an effective voice for businesses of all sizes and across different sectors. Their recovery plan, while this is only a start, identifies a path forwards. The CBI has suspended its own day-to-day operations due to the allegations and will only resume work if members back its plans for change. The group announced earlier this week it would have to let staff go as it looked to trim its wage bill by a third after losing revenue from a drop in membership. Asked if she was taking a pay cut, Ms Newton-Smith said, "We are looking at all options. My pay is already not as high as my predecessors," she added. "What is really important is that we protect as many jobs as we can through this. I don't want to lose any colleagues." Former Director General of the CBI, Tony Danker, was dismissed after being the subject of separate complaints of workplace misconduct unrelated to the sexual assault and rape claims, for which he has apologised. The Sunday Times reported he was preparing to sue the group. Mr Danker previously told the BBC he was considering legal action, but did not want to sue. The government has made a new offer in a bid to end a dispute over pay and jobs with civil servants, union bosses have said. Union officials said civil servants below senior grades have been offered a lump sum of £1,500 for 2022 to 2023. Civil servants have staged strikes in recent months, with unions calling for pay to reflect the rising cost of living. The fresh offer was broadly welcomed by union reps, who are now considering it. Unions said as well as the lump sum, the deal also included a moratorium on any changes to the civil service compensation scheme, and ministers had committed to avoiding compulsory redundancies. Last month, the government published new plans for an average 4.5% pay increase for civil servants, with an additional 0.5% for lower pay bands. Inflation, the rate at which prices rise, dipped slightly from around 10% to 8.7% in April, but remains high. Prospect Union General Secretary Mike Clancy said he welcomed the new offer, which he said addresses the 3 issues at the heart of this dispute. This payment will help to address the cost of living crisis civil servants have been facing, he said. For too long they have been at the back of the queue when it comes to public sector pay, and throughout this dispute we have been fighting for a deal comparable with that in the rest of the public sector. The Public and Commercial Service PCS union said the breakthrough came at a meeting on Friday between civil service union leaders and the Cabinet Office. Jeremy Quinn, Minister for the Cabinet Office, said he was pleased with the constructive engagement between the government and trade unions. He said the offer was both fair to the taxpayer and a recognition of the financial pressures civil servants have faced over the last year. FDA General Secretary Dave Penman said the new pay deal represented a clear demonstration that this message from the strikes has now been heard. For the first time in many years, we have reached a tangible positive outcome for the civil service, which compares well with the rest of the public sector, he added. That in itself is no mean feat. Members of the FDA and prospect unions suspended their planned strike action on the 7th of June, after talks were arranged. In April, more than 130,000 civil servants who are members of the PCS union went on strike over pay, pensions and job security. Job creation in the UK remained robust last month, despite rising prices and a sharp spike in borrowing costs weighing on the economy. Employers added 339,000 jobs, but the unemployment rate rose to 3.7% from April's unusually low 3.4%. The gains were far greater than expected, continuing a streak of hiring that has surprised economists. Analysts have expected hiring to slow as the US central bank raises interest rates to try to rein in rising prices. But payrolls have remained resilient, raising hopes the economy will avoid a painful recession, while also stirring debate about whether the Federal Reserve will have to take more aggressive action to bring inflation under control. Inflation, the rate at which prices rise, was 4.9% in the US in April. While that was the lowest in roughly 2 years, it remained more than double the 2% rate that the bank considers healthy. Expectations of what Friday's report might mean for interest rates in the months ahead were divided. This is the strangest employment report for some time, said Ian Shepherdson of Pantheon Macroeconomics, pointing to the disconnect between the job gains and the rise in unemployment reported by the Labour Department. Some analysts said the widespread job gains in May, as hospitals, restaurants, bars and construction firms added workers, were a sign that the Fed will have to raise interest rates more. The Labour Department also said employers added more jobs in April had been greater than previously estimated. Others said the report included signs that should convince the bank to hold off, pointing to moderating wage gains at 3.7%. The unemployment rate was also the highest in 7 months. US President Joe Biden, who has been dogged by public pessimism over the economy, celebrated the figures, saying it was a good day for the American economy and American workers. But others said the gains may not be sustainable. Seema Shah, chief global strategist at Principal Asset Management, said the blowout job figures in May indicated that the Fed's job is not yet done. The key question now is, can they wait until July, or does this monster payroll number trigger another burst of urgency, she said. Perhaps the report details with the unemployment rate rising and average hourly earnings growth slowing tilts the decision to July, but overall this is not a labour market that is slowing, and if it's not slowing, then inflation isn't coming down to 2%. If the US central bank continues to raise interest rates, that would lead to higher borrowing costs for households and businesses seeking mortgages or other loans. The expectation is that the economy will cool, easing pressures pushing up prices as higher borrowing costs lead people to cut back on spending and businesses to delay expansions and other activities. By year end, as the impact of Fed tightening feeds into the economy and corporates retrench, we expect a material weakening in job market conditions and an early 90s type economic recession, said Hussein Mehdi, macro and investment strategist at HSBC Asset Management. He added, a delay to this process implies a risk of higher for longer rates and a deeper downturn. From now, many on Wall Street appear to be betting on a pause at the Fed's June meeting. Stock indexes in the US, which were also cheering passage of a deal to avert US default, gained. The Dow Jones Industrial Average rose 2.1%, the S&P 500 was up 1.45%, and the Nasdaq ended 1% higher. The cost of detaining and deporting people arriving in the UK in small boats under planned new legislation could hit £6 billion over the next 2 years, internal government projections say. The illegal migration bill is currently going through Parliament. The BBC understands the Home Office estimates it will have to spend between £3 to £6 billion on detention facilities and ongoing accommodation and removals. It gives ministers the power to remove anyone arriving in the UK illegally. These migrants would be barred from claiming asylum here. The government insists it needs to act as a record numbers of people are arriving in small boats, and the cost of housing asylum seekers in hotels is running at almost £7 million per day. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has made tackling the issue one of his key priorities, but the bill has encountered opposition from within the Conservative Party and has been strongly criticised in the House of Lords, where it is currently being debated. Ministers have so far not revealed any costs linked to the bill or given any indication of the scale of investment it requires, but one senior government source described it as one of the main pressures on public spending. The Treasury is backing the policy, but there is concern among insiders that costs associated with the controversial bill are escalating. Home Office sources acknowledge that the bill's implementation would be expensive and complex, with one admitting that getting the whole process working would be a major logistical challenge. More than 45,000 people across the English Channel last year on small boats. Currently the UK has the capacity to detain around 2,000 people for immigration purposes, and work has begun to significantly scale this up. Whitehall sources stressed there were many variables and the purpose of the bill was also to act as a deterrent. The Home Office hopes the number of people being detained and therefore the costs will come down over time, but Treasury insiders worry about the deterrent effect not being completely reliable. One Home Office source close to the legislation admitted the deterrent effect was an unknown factor that could not be predicted. John Featonby, Chief Policy Analyst at the Refugee Council, said the Home Office is clearly aware that so-called deterrence measures simply don't work, and it is preparing to detain thousands of desperate people who will end up on our shores in search of protection. Until refugees fleeing violence and persecution are given a safe pathway to seek asylum in our country, they will continue to risk their lives to get here. Instead of moving forward with this hugely expensive and unworkable crackdown on refugees seeking safety in the UK, the government should be focusing on creating a system that protects the rights to claim asylum and that prioritises both compassion and control. Rob McNeill, Deputy Director of Oxford University's Migration Observatory, said costs were already very, very high, and that if asylum claims were processed faster, that there would be fewer people in the system. He told BBC Breakfast the question is whether the proposed bill would deter people from arriving in the UK in the first place. Responding to the figures, Labour's Shadow Home Secretary Yvette Cooper said the Conservatives are in total chaos on asylum, and their new bill is a sham that will make the soaring costs far worse. The government said it will publish its economic impact assessment of the bill in due course. Under the proposals in the illegal migration bill, anyone who arrives in the UK on an unauthorised boat across the English Channel would be detained before being removed within weeks, either to their home country or another country deemed safe. A plan to send asylum seekers to Rwanda to make their claims is still facing legal challenges in the court. If the illegal migration bill becomes law, it will apply retrospectively to anyone who arrived in the UK illegally after the 7th of March 2023. In the short term, there would still be a legacy system in place in parallel dealing with claims of those who arrived on small boats before that date. The Home Office says the annual cost of current asylum system has reached £3 billion per year. A government spokesperson said our illegal migration bill will help to stop the boats by making sure people smugglers and illegal migrants understand that coming to the UK illegally will result in detention and swift removal. Only then will they be deterred from making these dangerous journeys in the first place. The UK has to reduce its reliance on hotels for housing asylum seekers, Immigration Minister Robert Jenrick has said. Speaking to the BBC, he said he had to look after taxpayers and his duty was to the British public over migrants. He added it was fair and reasonable to ask asylum seekers to share rooms in hotels in some circumstances. It follows a dispute with asylum seekers over their temporary accommodation in central London. Last week, about 40 asylum seekers were offered space in a Pimlico hotel, but refused to enter after being asked to sleep 4 people per room. Head of Westminster Council Adam Huck expressed his concern in a letter to the Home Secretary, saying people who are likely to have been through significant and traumatic events were being asked to share an inappropriately sized room with multiple strangers. Asked about the case on the BBC's Sunday with Laura Kuenssberg programme, Mr Jenrick said the government did not want to use hotels, arguing it was taking away valuable assets for the local business community. People's weddings and personal events have had to be cancelled. But where we are using them, it's right that we got good value for money for the taxpayer, he added. And so if single adult males can share a room, and it's legal to do so, which will obviously depend on the size of the accommodation, then we'll ask people to do that, he added. However, he denied it was government policy for asylum seekers and migrants to be housed in shared rooms. He also suggested people were making illegitimate asylum claims, telling the BBC's Sunday with Laura Kuenssberg programme that the UK system was riddled with abuse. The country could not be allowed to be perceived as a soft touch. Labour said in response, after 13 years of Tory failure, the asylum system isn't just broken, it's costing taxpayers a fortune. Only Labour has a proper plan to stop dangerous boat crossings. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has made reducing the numbers coming into the UK illegally one of his key priorities. Part of his plan is to implement in the illegal migration bill, currently going through the Parliament. It would give ministers new powers to remove anyone arriving in the UK illegally and stop them claiming asylum here. But it has attracted fierce criticism, including by the Archbishop of Canterbury, who said it risked great damage to the UK's reputation. The BBC understands the Home Office estimates the plans in the bill could cost between £3 to £6 billion through spending on detention facilities as well as ongoing accommodation and removals. Last year, the number of people arriving in the UK in small boats via the English Channel hit over 45,000, the highest number since figures were first collected in 2018. So far this year, 7,610 people have made the crossings, a fall of more than 2,000 compared with the same time last year. The number of people claiming asylum has also risen, with figures in 2022 hitting a near 20-year high of 74,751. The government has a legal obligation to provide asylum seekers who are not allowed to work while their claim is being processed with a basic level of accommodation. Asylum seekers would typically only be housed in hotels or hostels for a few weeks before being moved to long-term self-catered accommodation. However, the increase in people claiming asylum and the backlog of unprocessed claims has led to a growth in the use of hotels to provide temporary accommodation. Government sources have previously told the BBC it is using 395 hotels to home more than 51,000 asylum seekers. The use of hotels has also proved to be expensive, costing almost £7 million a day. It has also prompted anger among many Conservative MPs, who say the plan puts a strain on local amenities. Ministers are trying different ways to accommodate the rising numbers of people who are coming to the UK, including housing people in barges or facilities on air bases. Mr Jenrick was keen to repeat his assertion that the government was taking a robust approach, and that by asking migrants to share rooms, he wanted to cut the costs to the taxpayer. But he was less keen to acknowledge that the backlog for asylum claims is extremely high, and that compared to a few years ago, it takes much longer for cases to be resolved. The problems with accommodation at the hundreds of hotels around the country would be far less acute if there are fewer people stuck in the system. When it comes to how ministers handle the issues, there are not many easy answers, but while Conservative ministers say they want to bring immigration down, they have presided over numbers going up and up. There is a serious clash between the rhetoric and the reality. In addition to illegal migration, there has also been an increase in people coming to the UK legally. The most recent figures saw net migration rise by 606,000. In 2010, the Conservatives promised to reduce net migration to below 100,000. Asked if that number was still realistic, Mr Jenrick said he didn't think targets were particularly helpful because behaviours are constantly changing. Boris Johnson has been warned public funding for his legal representation to the COVID inquiry could be withdrawn if he tries to undermine the government. Extracts of a Cabinet Office letter published in the Sunday Times tells the former PM to submit witness statements to officials for potential redactions. It comes as the Cabinet Office fights the inquiry's demand to see unredacted messages from Mr Johnson and officials. Mr Johnson has said he would give the material to the inquiry directly. The Cabinet Office confirmed the letter to Mr Johnson had been sent last week, but it is understood it was not issued in response to any recent event, and a government source said it had not been seen by ministers. In the letter, the Cabinet Office said, "The funding offer will cease to be available to you if you knowingly seek to frustrate or undermine either through your own actions or the actions of others the government's position in relation to the inquiry, unless there is a clear and irreconcilable conflict of interest on a particular point at issue." It said funding would only be available if Mr Johnson complied with certain conditions. These included having to send any witness statements or exhibit which he intended to provide to the inquiry to the Cabinet Office to be security checked, and not submitting evidence until he had applied any redactions, which the Cabinet Office had informed him were needed before submission. Immigration Minister Robert Jenrick said the government would hand over absolutely anything that is related to COVID or the purpose of the inquiry. He told the BBC's Sunday with Laura Kuenssberg programme this was the right thing to do, and that the government had already provided more than 55,000 documents. But he added, "There's no precedence, as far as I can see, to hand over things that have got absolutely nothing to do with COVID, such as things to do with civil servants' private lives." A Cabinet Office spokesperson said that the letter to Mr Johnson in no way prevented him from providing the inquiry with whatever evidence he wants to. The spokesperson said it was a letter from officials which was intended to protect public funds, and simply reiterates that taxpayer-funded lawyers must be used to aid the COVID inquiry and for no other purpose. The Cabinet Office said it made clear Mr Johnson had a duty to provide sincere witness to the inquiry independently and without reference to the views of the current government. The legal challenge to the inquiry's demand for Mr Johnson's WhatsApp messages and documents from during the pandemic was launched this week. The Cabinet Office refused to disclose some of the material by arguing it was not relevant to the inquiry. It would compromise ministers' rights to privacy and would set a precedent that could prevent ministers discussing policy matters in future. Despite this, Mr Johnson said he would be more than happy to give the material dating back to May 2021 to the inquiry. Scottish Secretary Alister Jack has said that the UK government should not change its position on Scotland's Deposit Return Scheme, DRS. UK ministers have made the exclusion of glass a condition of their support. First Minister Humza Yousaf has said the scheme is in jeopardy if the UK government does not make the necessary concessions. Mr Yousaf has written to Prime Minister Rishi Sunak asking him to include glass and wants a response by Monday. He told BBC Scotland that this deadline was effectively an ultimatum. The UK government wrote to the Scottish Government last week, granting a partial exemption to the Internal Market Act, which would exclude glass containers from the DRS, which is due to go live in Scotland in March next year. Glass has been excluded mainly because the UK government said deposit return schemes should be consistent across the UK. Mr Yousaf has urged a rethink from the UK government, citing concerns from businesses. In his letter to Mr Sunak, the First Minister said the removal of glass fundamentally threatens the viability of Scotland's DRS, with reduced revenue for the scheme administrator. Removing glass will also have a significant impact on business. He also said that apart from threatening jobs and investment, excluding glass would also put companies at a competitive disadvantage. In an interview on the BBC's The Sunday Show, Mr Jack strongly defended the UK government's position. "We've given the exclusion and there are 4 conditions in that exclusion which allow the schemes to work across the UK. He said there would be a single barcode system and membership of just one scheme would be needed instead of multiple schemes, so there would be no additional costs. He added that having no glass in the scheme makes sense as that's what industry have asked us to do. I haven't had a single letter from a business supporting the proposed scheme that Lorna Slater brought forward, whereas I've had over 1,000 letters of concern. And it's those concerns that we've taken into account when we've come to our conclusion, because we believe the deposit charge should be the same and reciprocated across the UK. If I get off the train in Carlisle and buy some recyclable material, and it's 10 pence in Carlisle and 20 pence in Dumfries, I double my money. That makes no sense. Mr. Jack added, "You have to protect internal markets and not have disruption to the drinks industry. French wine producers have told us they wouldn't be relabelling just for Scotland for glass. It was too small a market, so they would sell their wine elsewhere." He added that the British glass industry had written to the UK government saying the glass was not recycling glass, and that Secretary Scotland, the administrator of the scheme, was going to crush it and put it into roads, adding that it should instead be melted and recycled into bottles. However, this was later disputed by Secretary Scotland, which said the aggregate claims were totally inaccurate. The organisation, which represents drinks producers, retailers and trade bodies who are backing the DRS scheme, said it had set a high target for remelting glass so it could be reused to make new drinks containers. A spokesman said Secretary Scotland has consistently stated that the Scottish Deposit Return Scheme has set a target of 90% for the remelting and reuse of glass from the scheme's launch, rising to 95% post-launch. Any claims to the contrary are totally inaccurate. These claims have seriously jeopardised a £10 million investment in glass recycling planned for Scotland's Deposit Return Scheme. The Scottish Secretary also said there were issues with contamination because if a bottle was broken and had a shard of less than 10mm, it would contaminate all the recyclable material in the bin and would have to go to landfill. Mr. Jack said the UK government had listened to the drinks industry, including the Scotch Whisky Association, which said having glass in the scheme would cost it jobs. In his letter to the Prime Minister, Mr. Youssef had cited concerns raised by C&C Group, one of the country's biggest brewers and the company behind Tennent's Lager, but in correspondence Mr. Jack received from the firm, seen by the BBC, the company said it had been misrepresented. Reading a section of the letter, Mr. Jack said, "Please find enclosed the letter we sent to Humza Yousaf, Scotland's First Minister, setting out our position following last weekend's UK internal market announcement. Regrettably, specific passages of this letter were leaked to the media misrepresenting C&C's position on DRS. C&C Group Tennent's is actively seeking and supports a UK-wide scheme introduced at the same time across the 4 UK nations." The letter went on to say that the removal of glass would leave the company at a competitive disadvantage within the rest of the UK, and the firm cannot therefore support a standalone Scottish DRS that excludes glass. Secretary Scotland previously urged the UK and Scottish governments to get round the table to deliver the programme. It said it had invested about £300 million to develop the deposit return scheme. Scottish Secretary Alistair Jack's comments can be taken to mean that the UK government will not agree to what Humza Yousaf described to the BBC as an effective ultimatum. Mr. Yousaf wants the UK government to allow glass bottles to be part of the deposit return scheme and wants them to agree to this by Monday. He says he struggles to see how it can go ahead otherwise. The Scottish Government is expected to decide on the future of the scheme this week, but as things now stand, it would seem there is very little prospect of it going ahead next March as planned. Supporters of the Scottish Government will present the UK's government's position as an attack on devolution and the powers of Holyrood. The issue will be less the rights and wrongs of the scheme itself, and more the principle that a scheme backed by a majority of MSPs cannot go ahead. The UK government, on the other hand, would also mount a strong argument. It would argue it is listening to the concerns of businesses about the scheme and ensuring that there are no barriers to trade within Britain. This increasingly feels like a story about constitutional politics rather than the rights and wrongs of the deposit return scheme itself. A Labour MP has accused her party of choosing not to act on allegations of sexual misconduct by its MPs. Charlotte Nichols said Labour's hierarchy knew about allegations against current MPs, but can't even keep our own house in order. Speaking to BBC Radio 4's World at One, she said there was an underlying absolutely rotten culture at Westminster around sexual misconduct. Labour said the party would swiftly and fully investigate any allegations. Miss Nichols said the party had to be shamed into suspending Swansea West MP Geraint Davies after allegations that he subjected younger female colleagues to unwanted sexual attention were published by the Politico news website. It was damage limitation from the party's point of view, the Warrington North MP added. But they have known about this sort of behaviour not just from him, but from others as well, for a very long time, and they have chosen not to act. Mr Davies has said he does not recognise the allegations, but added, "If I had inadvertently caused offence to anyone, then I am naturally sorry." Under questioning, Miss Nichols said her party's response to allegations against a front-bench Labour MP, who was accused of sexually assaulting a female MP, had been utterly inadequate. The case was investigated by the Metropolitan Police, which announced in May it had ended its inquiry at the victim's request. In a statement responding to Miss Nichols' interview, Labour said it would strongly urge anyone with a complaint to come forward so that allegations could be swiftly and fully investigated and action taken. The party has ensured that there is a wide range of support available to complainants to provide confidence and confidential guidance throughout the disciplinary process. Miss Nichols said that when she first entered Parliament in 2019, she was fairly shocked to be given a verbal list of 30 MPs to avoid by a Labour official. People I was told to do everything I could to make sure that I wasn't alone with, to never accept a drink from, to not get in a lift with, she said. People like that take their bad behaviour so widely known and so little action has been taken about this that really it's left to individuals to try to keep themselves safe as far as possible by staying out of the orbit of these people. Miss Nichols said claims of sexual impropriety were used as political point scoring by Westminster parties, including her own. When we can't even keep our own house in order, it is really upsetting both on a personal and political level, because we can and should be better. Former MP Alison McMahon died of cancer linked to asbestos exposure. Now a son is calling for asbestos to be removed from all buildings to protect lives. Asbestos is a material which, if inhaled, can cause cancer and is the biggest cause of work-related deaths in the UK. Miss Mahone, who died last year of malignant mesothelioma at the age of 85, was best known as a fiery Labour left-winger and a close ally of former Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn. But the former Halifax MP also campaigned tirelessly for asbestos victims, backing calls for a public inquiry into the high incidence of asbestos-related disease amongst former power industry workers. She said she had been exposed to asbestos when she worked as an auxiliary nurse at a West Yorkshire hospital in the 1960s and 1970s, an inquest was told in January. She also believed she could have been exposed during the 17 years she spent in Parliament, the inquest heard. Miss Mahone's son, Chris, told the BBC Alice was very keenly aware of what was going to happen to her once she had had her diagnosis. Her plans had to be replaced with a calm acceptance that death was coming. His mother lived next door to a plumber who also died from mesothelioma at the age of about 60. Additionally, a young man who was a carpenter and builder and well known to the family died from mesothelioma. So we saw two hard-working men reduced to ghosts before their early deaths, says Chris. Asbestos is classified as being carcinogenic, which means it can cause cancer such as mesothelioma and other dangerous lung conditions when the fibres are inhaled. Until it was banned in 1999, it was widely used as a building material for roofing, insulation, walls and flooring. It remains present in buildings across the UK. As long as the asbestos is in good condition and is not disturbed, there is negligible risk, according to Health and Safety Executive. But if it is disturbed, it can become a danger to health, because asbestos fibres are released into the air and people may breathe them in. Companies have a duty to prevent employees being exposed to the substance at work under the control of Asbestos Regulations 2012. However, the regulations state that asbestos-containing materials that are in good condition are unlikely to be disturbed can be left in place. MPs from all parties have campaigned for more action to get rid of asbestos, which can be a complex and costly process. Last year, the Commons Work and Pensions Committee called for a strategy with a 40-year deadline to remove all asbestos from public and commercial buildings. The government's position was set out in April by Rishi Sunak in answer to a question from Conservative MP Jane Hunt. The Prime Minister said, The law does require duty holders to assess whether asbestos is present, what condition it is in, and whether it gives rise to a risk of exposure, and they must draw up a plan to manage that risk, which must include removal if it cannot be safely managed where it is located. Ms Hunt backs the charity Mesothelioma UK's campaign for a register of all workplaces in the country that contains asbestos and a timetable for eradicating it. The charity says the situation is a ticking time bomb and is asking the government to prioritise high-risk settings such as schools and hospitals. Chris, who works as a professor of law in New Zealand, is also calling for more action from the government, arguing that asbestos should not be left in place. The government has a duty to protect lives from a known indiscriminate killer such as asbestos that requires proactive action to locate and remove asbestos. Asbestos is in many settings often mingled with other products, and the argument is often put forward that it is best left in place because it is only a risk if it is disturbed. But the problem is that buildings deteriorate and need refurbishment or are knocked down and replaced, and this will lead to asbestos being released in uncontrolled circumstances. The safest thing to do is remove the risk. In 2019, there were more than 5,000 asbestos-related deaths, including from cancers such as mesothelioma. In January, an inquest ruled that Miss Mahone came by her death as a result of an industrial disease. Miss Mahone had blamed the disease on her exposure to asbestos during time as a nurse at Northoram Hospital in Calderdale, West Yorkshire, the inquest was told. She had described in a compensation claim how the temporary huts she worked were made of corrugated asbestos sheets that had been disturbed by maintenance work, but she also believed she may have been exposed to the substance during her time as an MP, after being told after her retirement in 2005 that Parliament was riddled with asbestos. Asbestos was identified in 680 rooms across the parliamentary estate in surveys carried out between 2019 to 2022 by the Parliamentary Maintenance Service team. A UK Parliament spokesperson says, as with many historical buildings, asbestos is present and appropriately managed. The risk to anyone on the estate is very low. The spokesperson added that any work posing an asbestos risk is properly planned in compliance with regulations. However, the Public Accounts Committee recently released a report that found a growing list of health and safety incidents within Parliament, including some involving asbestos. There are already people on decades-long risk watch lists after being exposed to asbestos in the building, warned the committee's Labour chairwoman Dame Meg Hillier. Regarding asbestos in Parliament, Chris said every workplace, including such grand places as the Palace of Westminster, should be a safe place. The risks of asbestos are so well known now, and have been for decades, that steps to identify and remove asbestos from all workplaces should have been completed by now. At the very least, there should be detailed audits to determine the risks, which can no doubt be done alongside other refurbishment. The UK Health Security Agency says asbestos should not be removed without expert advice. People are advised to contact their local council for more information about its removal and disposal. MPs and peers accused of violent or sexual offences could be banned from entering Parliament under new plans. If approved, the plans would allow a panel of parliamentarians to bar MPs or peers if they are deemed to pose a risk, even if police have not charged them with an offence. The proposed rule changes come after months of fresh claims of sexual misconduct against MPs. MPs are expected to vote on the plans later this month. The proposals have been drawn up by the House of Commons Commission, a body of senior MPs, which oversees the working of the Commons following a consultation. Initially, the consultation looked at banning MPs or peers only when they have been charged by police for violent or sexual offences. But unions representing parliamentary staff have told the BBC they understand the commissions have widened the plans to take a more risk-based approach. Under the proposals, it is thought a risk assessment would be triggered once an MP or peer was reported for violent or sexual offences. If an investigation found they posed a risk, they could then be barred from the Houses of Parliament. Currently, police can ban MPs or peers from Parliament as a bail condition after they have been arrested, but parliamentary figures in charge of discipline, like party whips, do not have the power to stop an MP coming into Parliament. They usually rely on informal agreements with MPs accused of misconduct, asking them to stay away while investigations are continuing. If an MP is investigated by Parliament's Standards Committee or the Independent Expert Panel (IEP) that was set up to investigate bullying or harassment cases against MPs, they can face a suspension if these bodies recommend one. For an MP to be investigated by the IEP, a report must be made and upheld about them to Parliament's Independent Complaints and Grievance Scheme (ICGS). The proposals come after a number of high-profile cases in which parliamentarians facing allegations of sexual misconduct were permitted to continue coming into work on the parliamentary estate. On Thursday, the Labour Party suspended Swansea West MP Geraint Davies following reports by the Politico News website that he had subjected younger female colleagues to unwanted sexual attention. Mr Davies has said he does not recognise the allegations, but added, "If I have inadvertently caused offence to anyone, then I am naturally sorry." Essex Police are investigating an allegation of serious sexual assault by Conservative MP Julian Knight. The investigation came after the Metropolitan Police referred the investigation to the Essex Force, having shelved its own investigation into the Solihull MP in March. Mr Knight has denied what he describes as a false and malicious accusation. In May last year, party whips asked an unnamed Conservative MP arrested on suspicion of rape and sexual assault to stay away from Parliament. The MPs were not banned from Parliament during the investigation, which was later dropped by the police. Welcome to the coverage of Holly Willoughby's return to ITV's This Morning after a crisis hit the show. Up until a few weeks ago, Willoughby had been hosting the popular daytime TV programme with Philip Schofield for more than a decade, but her co-host resigned last month after admitting he'd been in a relationship with a younger colleague. Schofield told the BBC on Friday he had lost everything and that his career was over. Willoughby has been on a 2-week break since the resignation, and this is continuing over a discussion whilst she goes and says what she needs to. What happened to This Morning? On This Morning, one of British television's most popular daytime shows, it's been in crisis since Philip Schofield admitted an affair with a younger colleague. Schofield quit after he admitted he had lied about the relationship to his employer, broadcaster ITV, his wife, agent and lawyer. Schofield and his co-host Holly Willoughby were loved by viewers for their on-screen chemistry, and clips of them breaking into fits of giggles on air often went viral. But in recent weeks, reports emerged that their friendship was souring. Before the most recent headlines, the pair faced negative press coverage around Queuegate last September when they were accused of skipping the queue to view Queen Elizabeth II's coffin lying in state. Then in April, Schofield's brother was found guilty of sexually abusing a boy. Willoughby was reportedly upset that he had not warned her in advance about what his brother was accused of, or that the trial was coming. A timeline of the Schofield controversy. As we wait for Holly Willoughby to return to the This Morning sofa, let's take a look at how the controversy has unfolded over recent weeks. In early May, tabloid speculation about a behind-the-scenes feud grows, with reports claiming the hosts are barely speaking. On the 11th of May, Philip Schofield says the last few weeks haven't been easy, but Holly Willoughby was his rock. On the 20th of May, Schofield announces he is stepping down from hosting. On the 26th of May, he resigns from ITV and admits he had an affair with a younger colleague. On the 27th of May, ITV releases a statement saying it is investigating rumours of a relationship between Schofield and the employee, but both had repeatedly denied it. On the 2nd of June, Schofield tells the BBC he has lost everything and doesn't see a future for his career. And on the 5th of June, Willoughby returns to the show after 2 weeks off. His career is over after the affair, Schofield says. In an emotional and frank interview with BBC News last week, Philip Schofield said he had lost everything and did not see a future for his career. Schofield told Amol Rajan his career was over following the affair he had with a younger male colleague. However, Schofield said the affair was a grave error and he shouldn't have done it. A delicate balance. Holly Willoughby will have to strike a delicate balance on Monday's episode of This Morning. On the one hand, she will have to be serious and sincere as she opens the programme by talking about the departure of her former friend and co-presenter Philip Schofield. But then she will need to change gear and attempt to put the recent controversy to one side as she carries on with the rest of the programme. Willoughby will have to adopt a more laid-back tone as she interviews celebrity guests and introduces the programme's staple items on cooking, fashion and showbiz news. Schofield's exit was so high-profile that she has had no choice but to refer to it, but she must also keep This Morning's regular viewers in mind who come to the show every day for its easy and undemanding mix of laid-back content. What has Holly said so far? As we wait for Holly Willoughby's return to This Morning, here's a quick look at how she has responded so far to the controversy. When the news her long-time co-presenter was leaving after having an affair came to light, Willoughby said it was very hurtful to discover Schofield lied to her about his relationship with a younger colleague. In a statement, Willoughby said when reports of it first surfaced, she asked Phil directly if this was true and was told it was not. Writing on Instagram, Willoughby added it had taken time to process the news. After the announcement that Schofield was stepping down, ITV said Willoughby would take an early half-term holiday before returning today. Who is Holly's co-host This Morning? Holly Willoughby will be presenting alongside Josie Gibson upon her return to the This Morning sofa. Gibson joined the This Morning team in 2019 as a competition announcer. She has co-hosted on several occasions as a relief presenter. She found fame on reality show Big Brother in 2010 and has since appeared on several programmes, including Loose Women. She also worked as a showbiz reporter for Channel 5 show OK TV. In 2021, Gibson filled in for Willoughby on the This Morning for the first time. It was later confirmed she would cover holidays for the programme. Alison Hammond on Friday. I love Schofield. On Friday, This Morning presenter Alison Hammond fought back tears as she discussed Philip Schofield's departure. Hammond said he had apologised and urged people not to judge the actions too harshly. I'm just finding it really painful because obviously I loved Philip Schofield, she said. Holly's back on the sofa. Holly Willoughby makes her much anticipated return to This Morning very shortly, taking a seat on the sofa alongside her temporary co-host Josie Gibson. Stay with us as we bring you the updates on her expected statement in light of the reactions to Philip Schofield's exit. Breaking news. Holly refers to Schofield as not telling the truth. We're hearing from Holly Willoughby now. She starts off by thanking Josie Gibson for being there. Willoughby says it feels strange being there without Philip Schofield and asks the audience if they're feeling okay. She says she imagines the viewers are feeling a lot like she was, shaken, troubled and let down. You and all of us at This Morning gave us our love and support to someone who is not telling the truth, she says. Start of a new chapter, Holly says. I hope that as we start this new chapter, we get back to a place of warmth and magic, Holly tells viewers. As she tears up, Willoughby says she hopes the show can return to normality. She's hugged by her co-host Josie Gibson, and the show gets off to a start. They themselves felt they had to resign. Willoughby's statement at the start of Monday's This Morning deemed heartfelt and difficult for her to deliver, which is perhaps why she held her co-presenter Josie Gibson's hand for emotional support. One of the most striking things was that Willoughby only used Schofield's name once, right at the beginning. After that, she didn't even refer to his gender when discussing recent events. They themselves felt they had to resign from ITV and step down from a career that they loved, she said in reference to Schofield. Willoughby looked tearful as she concluded her statement, thanking viewers for their messages and telling them the team will continue to work hard every single day to bring you the show that we love. But how will it have to go? How will it go down with the audience? Willoughby's continued presence on the programme will depend on her authenticity. Viewers will be watching the rest of the programme closely to see if she and the show can get past the elephant in the room. Holly's opening statement in full. Hi there, good morning, Josie. Thank you for being here. Right, deep breath. Firstly, are you okay? I hope so. Feels very strange indeed sitting here without Phil. I imagine that you might have been feeling a lot like I have, shaken, troubled, let down, worried for the well-being of people on all sides of what's been going on and full of questions. You, me and all of those at This Morning gave our love and support to someone who was not telling the truth, who acted in a way that they themselves felt they had to resign from ITV and step down from a career that they loved. That is a lot to process, and it is equally hard to see the toll that it's taken on their own mental health. I think what unites us all now is a desire to heal for the health and well-being of everyone. I hope that as we start this new chapter and get back to a place of warmth and magic that this show holds for all of us, we can find strength in each other. And from my heart, can I just say thank you for all of your kind messages, and thank you for being here in This Morning. Myself, Josie, Dermot, Alison and Craig, and every single person that works on this show will continue to work hard every single day to bring you the show that we love. Holly Willoughby is back hosting ITV's This Morning for the first time since her co-star Philip Schofield quit. In her opening remarks, she explains how strange it feels in reference to sitting here without Phil. Rest of the show is considered to be business as usual, with items on coping with hay fever, holiday scams, getting fit for the summer, a recipe for barbecue king prawns, and an interview with singer Adam Lambert. It is very much business as usual for This Morning, now Willoughby's statement is out of the way. Her emotional opening speech doesn't seem to be overshadowing the rest of the programme. She and co-presenter Josie Gibson have cleanly and skillfully segued into the show's regular tone and content as they navigated between health tips and the newspaper review. On Twitter, viewers seem to have some suspicions about her authenticity, but it's worth remembering that Twitter is by far the most cynical of all social media platforms. Some users drew comparisons with the speech Jennifer Aniston's character gave in Apple TV's The Morning Show, which also had a storyline about a disgraced former presenter. Others compared Willoughby's tears to Matt Hancock's on Good Morning Britain in 2021. One viewer recalled guest presenter Alison Hammond becoming emotional about Schofield last week, writing, "On Friday I believed Alison and you could tell she was truly upset. Unfortunately I didn't feel the same listening to Holly Willoughby this morning." Another referred to Willoughby's almost angelic on-screen look. "If I was a cynical person, I'd say they'd made a very conscious decision to dress Holly Willoughby in white for her big speech," he wrote. This Morning editor criticised for disrespectful response. Away from today's show, This Morning editor Martin Frizzell has faced criticism over his deeply inappropriate response to allegations of toxicity at ITV. Frizzell was approached by Sky News ahead of Holly Willoughby's return to the show for the first time following Philip Schofield's departure. Asked about the culture on This Morning, he replied, "I'll tell you what's toxic, and I've always found it toxic. Aubergine. Do you like aubergine? Do you? Do you like aubergine? Because I don't like aubergine. It's just a personal thing." MP John Nicholson, a former BBC journalist who sits on the Commons Culture, Media and Sports Committee, tweeted, "This is a deeply inappropriate and disrespectful way to respond to questions about safeguarding vulnerable staff and bullying in the workplace at ITV." ITV bosses to speak to MPs. ITV bosses were due to appear in front of the House of Commons Culture, Media and Sports Committee to discuss reforms to the laws governing public broadcasting, and many expect they will be asked about the ongoing controversy. ITV boss Dame Caroline McCall has also been called to a parliamentary committee on the 14th of June to answer questions about the broadcaster's approach to safeguarding and complaint handling following Schofield's exit. SNP MP John Nicholson, a former BBC journalist who sits on the committee, is also the SNP's culture spokesman, said on Twitter that recent events at ITV were a cause for concern, and that he was looking forward to getting some answers from ITV bosses. Holly Willoughby has said she feels shaken, troubled and let down as she returned to ITV's This Morning. The presenter's appearance on Monday's show was her first appearance since the departure of her co-host, Philip Schofield. Willoughby addressed viewers directly and said it felt very strange indeed sitting here without Phil. She added recent events have been a lot to process and thanked viewers for their messages of support. Her statement received a mixed response on social media, with some viewers questioning her authenticity. Schofield left his role on This Morning last month following reports of a rift with Willoughby. The 61-year-old later exited ITV altogether after he admitted lying about an affair he had with a young male colleague while he was still married. On Monday, Willoughby asked viewers, "Are you okay? I hope so. It feels very strange indeed, sitting here without Phil. I imagine you might be feeling a lot like I have, shaken, troubled, let down, worried for the well-being of people on all sides of what's going on and full of questions. You, me and all of us at This Morning gave our love and support to someone who was not telling the truth, who acted in a way that they themselves felt they had to resign from ITV and step down from a career they loved." Willoughby continued, "That is a lot to process and it's equally hard to see the toll that it's taken on their own mental health. I think that what unites us all now is a desire to heal for the health and well-being of everyone. I hope that as we start this new chapter and get back to a place of warmth and magic that this show holds for all of us, we can find strength in each other. And from my heart, can I just thank you all for your kind messages and thank you for being here this morning. Every single person that works on this show will continue to work hard every single day to bring you the show that we love." In an interview with BBC News last week, Schofield said he had accepted his career was over following the affair, describing it as a grave error. Willoughby is presenting Monday's episode of This Morning with Josie Gibson, a former Big Brother winner who regularly guest presents the ITV daytime show. Willoughby's statement at the start of Monday's This Morning seemed heartfelt and difficult for her to deliver. She was seen holding Gibson's hand for emotional support. Perhaps one of the most striking things was that Willoughby only used Schofield's name once, right at the beginning, and that she did not even refer to his gender when discussing recent events. They themselves felt they had to resign from ITV and step down from a career that they loved, she said in reference to Schofield. Willoughby's continued presence on the programme will depend on her authenticity, and some viewers on social media were sceptical about her statement. Some users drew comparisons with the speech Jennifer Aniston's character gave in Apple TV's The Morning Show, which also had a storyline about a disgraced former presenter. Others compared Willoughby's tears to former Health Secretary Matt Hancock's on Good Morning Britain in 2021. One viewer recalled guest presenter Alison Hammond becoming emotional about Schofield last week, writing, "On Friday I believed Alison, and you could tell she was truly upset. Unfortunately, I didn't feel the same listening to Holly Willoughby this morning." One viewer referred to Willoughby's almost angelic on-screen look. "If I was a cynical person, I'd say they made a very conscious decision to dress Holly Willoughby in white for her big speech." Willoughby's emotional opening speech seemingly did not overshadow the rest of the programme. She and Gibson cleanly and skillfully segued into the show's regular tone and content, with items on coping with hay fever, holiday scams, getting fit for summer, a recipe for barbecue king prawns, and an interview with singer Adam Lambert. It was very much business as usual for This Morning once Willoughby's statement was out of the way. It has been a matter of weeks since the last Love Island winners were crowned, but it is once again time to open those villa doors. Series 10 of the ITV2 dating show kicks off on Monday evening, and producers will be hoping it proves more popular with viewers than its winter iteration. Despite the positive reaction to new host Maya Jama, the show recorded lower audiences and less online commentary than previous series. The opening episode drew 1.2 million viewers, half the audience of the 2022 summer series. First night. One big change implemented for 2023 was ITV's ban on contestants' social media being run by friends or family while they were on the show. This policy of leaving accounts dormant was introduced to protect islanders and those close to them from online bullying and abuse. Pop culture and reality TV writer Nikki Onafo says the downside is that savvy contestants could no longer capitalise on well-managed accounts to help boost popularity or engagement in the show. The appeal of Love Island is the talk on Twitter at 9 PM every night, she told the BBC. Not having friends or family handle your social media does hinder you. You'll remember 2022 contestant Ikena Ekwana's cousin was tweeting the funniest things, creating reactive content and trending on Twitter. Miss Onafe, aged 27, said the appetite for the show has certainly dwindled in her friendship group, mostly because they are no longer the same age as the show's contestants. In 2017, we'd watch the series because we were looking for love, we'd see romance on screen and hope we'd one day end up having that. But now our age group has experienced those different relationships and we can see that what happens on Love Island doesn't happen in real life, it's fake to us. Miss Onafe said her friends still love reality TV but are turning their attention to shows such as Love is Blind or Married at First Sight. My friends are entering into a new part of their life. We're thinking about houses, kids and marriage, and I think the core audience of Love Island are too. With these dating shows, you're seeing genuine relationships where people are more interested in listening to people, not just looking at physical attraction, she said. Love Island's viewing figures peaked between 2017 and 2019, with about 3.5 million people tuning in each night. The most popular islanders would often leave the villa with more than 1 million followers on Instagram, giving them an instant platform to launch a career as an influencer. Contestants such as Olivia Atwood in 2017, Dr. Alex George in 2018, and Molly May Hague in 2019 became household names for many. ITV's new social media rules seem to have ended the overnight success many previous contestants enjoyed, with many Series 9 cast members leaving the show with about 100,000 followers. Talent manager Gemma Epstein, who works with content creators at the DDA group, says this makes things more fair. People from completely different industries go on a reality TV program and come out and are offered incredible money and major brand deals, when their content before was just selfies in the mirror. She said reality TV contestants can struggle to come across as genuine and authentic because they will often promote fast fashion companies and other brands that do not showcase their individuality or personal interests. Contestants won't be aware of what's going on with their accounts that friends back home are running. They'll just sign up to a management agency and set up big brand endorsements on their behalf. Ms. Epstein said that in spite of ITV's new social media rules, the reality TV influencer model has been losing popularity for a while as consumers look for more authenticity online. The creators we look after aren't here for fame, they want to provide a really positive, uplifting message to inspire and help people, she told the BBC. We want to make sure our creators inspire their audiences, are motivational and only promote products they are passionate about, as opposed to accepting deals for the sake of money. She added that her agency is open to working with reality stars, but that it depends on their goals and what type of work they want to be doing. Stormzy is used to wowing the crowds at festivals. His 2019 headline Glastonbury appearance was considered an all-around triumph. His latest festival appearance, though, was a slightly different prospect. The Heavy as the Head singer and rapper was appearing at the famous literary festival at Hay on Wye in Wales to talk about his publishing imprint Murky Books. The star's slot changed from Saturday to Sunday, and rumours whizzed around the festival site about the late change. At various points I was told it was because he wanted to watch Saturday's FA Cup final, featuring his beloved Manchester United. If he did, he might have wished he'd missed it, or that he was busy partying with Beyonce, who has been in London on tour. But it turned out he was making an appearance at Burna Boy's London Stadium gig. In his rescheduled Hay slot, Stormzy spoke to mark 5 years since the launch of Murky Books, which aims to develop and produce diverse storytellers. With Murky Books, everyone just sees the one man. But there are so many people who allow me to thrive, he said. I'm very blessed, I have the most amazing team, so anytime I've had an idea like Murky Books, I just have to send a text. One day I said, you know, we should do a book company, man. And lo and behold, here we are. Stormzy said he had a revelation about finding his own authentic voice when he started reading a particular novel at school. With literature and writing music, both are about finding your voice and the way you write. When you're young, there's a way you write in school, there's a comma, and you put all these words in and all the fancy moves. But it's not about that. It's about telling a story. There was an amazing book in school called Vernon Godlittle, and I was so amazed by this book. It was written in the style of character, 2 words and then a full stop. That's when I realised the whole smoke and mirrors of writing being Shakespearean eloquent. It's not about that. Your truth is enough. Your words are enough. Your voice is enough. The Star, that is, said it was important that Murky, which has published works by Derek Owusu and Mallory Blackman, covered all genres. The reason I wanted all these various memoirs, poetry, fiction, non-fiction is black people are not monolithic, we are multifaceted. Growing up where I was, people think, okay, you're a young black boy that raps, that's what you do. And it's like, no, there are days when I'm really angry, days when I feel on top of the world, even with literature, we are all multifaceted. Murky will explore another genre this summer when it publishes its first rom-com author, Taylor Dior Rumble's debut novel, The Situationship. She told BBC News, being published by a diverse publisher like Murky Books is important to me, because throughout the entire process I didn't feel like I was explaining my characters or their worlds to my team, nor did I feel the need or pressure to edit my story for that white gaze. My book touches on imposter syndrome and the microaggressions black women face in the office, and it was so cathartic talking through these points with an editor that already gets where I'm coming from. I'm incredibly inspired by how a lot of what Stormzy does outside of music centres on giving back to the community and helping others achieve greatness. The man himself hopes his imprint, a collaboration with Penguin Random House UK, will continue to grow and inspire. My actual dream is being 80 years old, no one cares about Stormzy anymore, he's just chilling with his dogs, and I see someone and they say, yo, I'm a published author, I sold so many books on Murky, and it's nothing to do with me. It's not a vanity thing, it's just this engine that allows black authors to come and grow and thrive. And that's for me, that will be the news for today, so I'll be signing off. If you want to watch any of my other videos, please feel free to do so in the end screen or on my channel.